Okay, hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Popoidin.
I'm your co-host, James McVeigh.
And we are Fermenting Opinions, the podcast in search of a more palatable political ferment. Today, I almost said tonight because it's usually tonight when we're doing these things, but today we have on deck Mr. Steven Reynolds, running for U.S. Congress, the 4th Congressional District.
4th Congressional, yep.
State of Tennessee, and this is a primary run, correct?
I do have a primary opponent this time. I was the 2016 Democratic Congressional nominee, and we ran just, that was barely a year ago. I've been a first-time candidate for about 16 months now, so we made it through our first campaign last time in about 7 months. So.
Excellent.
So I guess to go from there, why don't we just start off just by asking why you want to run for Congress?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, the very first time that we got in the race, the Democrats have seen better days in Tennessee. There's no doubt about that.
Lord knows that.
And so, last time I went to the state party because I was researching. I like to stay informed about politics and have for my entire life. And so I decided to go meet with the Tennessee State Party and say, hey, do you have someone that's going to run against Scott Desjardins this time? And unfortunately, they didn't. And so, I thought that the American way is about balance. I thought that people deserved a choice. I know that Scott has a lot of folks that Congressman Desjardins has a lot of people that don't, really want to vote for him. And so that's why I decided to get into politics for the very first time. And so after 7 short months of campaigning on a fraction of a typical campaign budget, we acquired more votes than any challenging Democrat in the state of Tennessee.
That's impressive.
And thank you. And 18,000 more votes than Hillary Clinton did in the 4th Congressional District.
That's very impressive, actually. And that leads me to what I was going to ask you is, and I think we've got the answer there. Are you really a lifelong Democrat, or how do you feel about party affiliation and where you stand, I guess, on a party basis?
Well, like most Tennesseans, I would say that I've been, if you have to put a label on everyone, I think that's part of the problem today is a political ideology litmus test out there. And that's one of the reasons why the extremes have taken over our country. Like most Tennesseans, I'm probably a little conservative on some things. I definitely believe we should balance our federal budget. I think that it's certainly I think that is an economic, national security issue really at this point. And so, the funny thing that struck me in the last presidential election was the sequester. It was in the Republican primary that they started calling for the end of the sequester. And the sequester actually started lowering the federal budget deficit when it was in place. And so at the end of the day, however, on a lot of social issues and a lot of issues that affect the people of Tennessee, I think that I'm a civil libertarian on the social side. And so without the Democrats are a big tent party. I really truly believe that there's no litmus test, ideological litmus test, and I truly believe that. Last year with state representatives, I was running all over 16 counties, and so I met a lot of different people that were also running. And so to give you an example, in the 4th Congressional District of Tennessee, I had one guy that was running that was a state rep. He was anti-abortion. He was anti-gay marriage. He was pro-Second Amendment. And then on the other end of the district, I had an atheist running who was pro-choice and pro-gay marriage. And so you have all running as Democrats. And so to me, that proved right there that the Democrats don't put an ideological litmus test on people. And so that's why I ran as a Democrat.
Oh, that's fair. I mean,
yeah,
entirely.
I agree with that as well. That I view the Democratic Party as a big tent party, and which can be both a blessing and a curse sometimes because you do get into divisions and things like that.
Oh my gosh, it was just like the Republican Party. They're divided in two right now, and the Democrats are not far behind. We have really far left, and the blue dogs up in Congress is what they're called, the blue conservative Democrats.
Exactly. Dixiecrats.
Dixiecrats. One of the things, to talk about Jim Cooper up in Nashville. Well, one of the things that strikes you when you walk in his office in Washington is he has a debt clock. And he specifically spells out exactly how much money
he's right there with
each individual American's going to owe. And right now it's about $62,000 per American.
Yep.
And so, those are things that we can be concerned about and want to do something about and also go across the spectrum to the other side, depending on what the issue is.
Yes, and speaking of that, if we're all okay with this, I'd like to get kind of into a little bit of issues, especially economy and jobs.
Sure.
I've gone through, as a heads up, I've gone through your page. I think it's Reynolds #4 Congress TN.com.
That's right.
And we'll give you a second
Congress.
And so I've read your issues pages and everything, and that brings up a lot of questions
Absolutely.
for me. You talk about government responsibility to provide worker-friendly environments.
Right.
And especially for the 4th District, that obviously you represent those people, and you want, and we have kind of a long-standing history of trying to promote that. I mean, we have GM in Spring Hill,
right.
we've got things going on with that. But my question is, when you say government responsibility to provide for worker-friendly environments, what does that entail?
Well, that's a great question. So really, I'm talking about the environment. So rather than people on the dole, I want to create the environment where we can have high-paying advanced manufacturing jobs in the 4th District. People don't realize the 4th District of Tennessee, 16 counties. It runs from Spring Hill all the way over to Spring City, Cleveland, Tennessee. Vast cultural differences. The three stars on the Tennessee flag.
You're broaching well in the Western Territory.
Absolutely, East, West, East, Middle, and West, and so you have a vast cultural difference as well. But the average median income is $33,000 a year in the 4th Congressional
I think we
District.
can all agree that's unacceptable.
That's very low, and the number one industry is agriculture. So I believe that if government goes back to the fundamentals, you guys are football fans.
Obviously, my Titans aren't doing so well today.
Right.
I think we've chalked up a loss at this point.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing a podcast. So. Right. But really, when you look at the how do we get people, how do we lift people up, how do we attract these jobs? Recently it's a lot of tax incentives. The state government will say, if you come here, you won't have to pay property tax for the next 10 years or corporate tax for the next 10 years.
Sure.
So blocking and tackling, though, the government, I believe, should be fundamentally responsible for 3 things. The infrastructure of our country, I believe that's a legitimate function of government.
Okay.
And when I talk about infrastructure, I don't just mean traditional infrastructure, which, by the way, I'm an expert in. 30 years, started in a rock quarry with a shovel, blue-collar roots, and have worked my way up. And so infrastructure, traditional infrastructure, but also digital infrastructure. People don't realize, especially here in Murray County or in Rutherford County, when you get out to these rural 15 counties, a lot of folks can't access the internet. They have no way. The children can't access the internet.
I have to agree entirely in 2017 that infrastructure includes the internet.
Absolutely.
There's not even a question.
Well, Google and Apple's not going to come to Murray County or Shelbyville or McMinnville or Decatur, Tennessee, unless they can plug in.
Yeah.
And so that is a very important component to creating the environment for job creation and good job creation. Now, the second part of that is education. I know that we'll get to education a little bit in depth in a minute. But also investing in our education. Once again, Google and Apple is not going to come to the 4th Congressional District unless they have an educated workforce. Okay. So it is in our best interest to find the most cost-effective way. And when we talk about that, also in addition to improving the classroom environments, we test our 5th graders more than Congress in session.
Lord. Ain't that, and that's been that way my entire life. I mean, I'm 30 years old. Right. I'm a product of Murray County Public Schools.
That's wonderful. So, I'm a public Tennessee product as well, or Tennessee Public School.
And I'll tell you what, we've taken standardized tests day in and day out, and they're garbage tests.
That's right.
They don't really test much of anything. Now, I was blessed, I guess, in the sense that I read a lot and I knew a lot of history and things like this, so I could ace these tests.
Sure.
But that's not really a standard you should judge somebody's education by, in my opinion.
Right. Absolutely. Well, what was it? Mark Twain said, "I never let school get in the way of my education." Right.
Yes.
So, but the third component of that, creating job creation, is hospitals. Once again, in healthcare. Apple, Google, these big companies, General Motors wouldn't have come to Spring Hill unless they knew that there was quality health care that would be readily available to their workers and their employees. Yes. And so we have to do find the most cost-effective way to keep our rural hospitals open. Over in Rutherford County, we have the busiest emergency room in the state of Tennessee.
I have no doubt.
Can you imagine if the hospital in McMinnville closed? Or Lewisburg? They're going to come to Murfreesboro.
Is Lawrenceburg one of your
Lawrenceburg is not.
Okay.
Lewisburg is, but
Lawrenceburg has one that I'm familiar with, and that Crockett Hospital that's become some part of TriStar or something like that.
Right.
That still suffers from these problems. So I understand.
Right. Well, Polk County, Tennessee closed their doors today. So I think they're the 9th or the 10th hospital in the state of Tennessee that has closed in the last 3 years. And they actually had a GoFundMe account set up for their hospital in Polk County, which is one of the poorest counties in the state of Tennessee, second only to Grundy County, which is in the 4th Congressional District. And so anyway, those 3 components are what we have to work on. If we have those 3 components, good companies like Google, like Apple, like advanced manufacturing jobs, biotech, high-tech,
sure,
they're going to try to come into Tennessee. A lot of companies want to come in here now. And so I really want to stress on the fundamentals of creating those environments where those good jobs will come. That's how we lift people out of poverty.
And I wanted to ask you, James, does that respond well to concerns that you may have had sort of when you were reading the bylines?
Well, and I'm going to get there because I wanted to ask, you know, when you talk about infrastructure, education, and healthcare,
right,
obviously those are important things.
Yes.
And it does create a better business environment when your people have better healthcare, when your people are better educated,
right,
when the infrastructure system supports these things better.
Right.
Do you think that that is a responsibility of the government? Or do you think, or on the other end, is that something that you can incentivize with private end, like private investment? So
sure.
That really is where I'm asking, like, are you trying to, if you were a member of Congress, you were
sure,
elected, are you going to push for government funding to do these things, or are you going to push in the way of incentivizing private industries to provide that?
I honestly think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
So let me tell you why.
Okay.
Let's take P3, for example. You hear that word. President Trump talked about P3 and how we're going to have private investment in the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, and really that's toll roads, okay? That's really what we're talking about. The reality is,
toll roads?
Yeah, well, right. So, but it won't work it doesn't work in reality because only about 10% of the bridges out there that someone would actually invest in to actually create a toll. It's kind of like repatriating the money from overseas. We've done that before as a government. There's no guarantee that the money's going to come back. It's what these companies decide to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like this great thing. There's $3 trillion to be repatriated. However, the government can't force these companies to bring that money back.
I agree with you. And if they do, I think we're stepping outside of the bounds of constitutionality.
Absolutely.
You
So
know?
with roads, I think that the only way is the current way. Now, the road system, once again, is a quasi-governmental, private industry type of system that works. We have private contractors for the most part to build the roads, but they're managed and led by the state government. But when you get to the P3 part of that, I want to build a train. I want to build a high-speed rail from Rutherford County to the Davidson County line, from Murray County to the Davidson County line, or into Williamson County, really, for the 4th Congressional District.
Yeah, Williamson County be your stop.
Right, exactly, for me. But I want to build that rail so that folks that commute into Williamson or Davidson County from here in Murray County, the only way to do that will be to have a private investor come in and build that rail.
Of course.
Because you're looking at about a $2 billion project.
And so I guess my question comes in then. What is the incentive package you want to offer? And you don't have to give me exactly specific details because you got to weigh these and talk with people about it. But what do you think the actual, I guess the broad strokes of an incentive package would look like for a private investor to want to get involved in this?
So let me give you an example of a job where this is happening right now.
Okay.
I-4 that runs right through the middle of Orlando, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
If you fly your kids down into the Orlando airport and you're going to take them to Disney World.
Been there and done that.
Okay, you go right through the middle of Orlando, and it is a mess. It always has been a choke point. People have a terrible time getting through Orlando.
Yes, of course.
So what happened is that they did a P3 on this. They're expanding, I want to say 10 lanes on each side, expanding the capacity. It was a $2 billion project. And so what had to happen was a company, the lowest bidder actually came in and that you had to agree to finance the first $1 billion of this project. And so a company out of Spain, now this is where I start getting, with foreign companies coming in and investing.
Sure.
I have a little bit of an issue with that on the P3 as well. But a company out of Spain agreed to come in, finance the first $1 billion. The taxpayers are paying, the federal government is paying the other $1 billion.
No taxpayers.
That's right.
We're the ones paying.
But here's the deal, when you asked about the incentive. So that company from Spain is going to receive the tolls on that road through Orlando for the next 50 years.
Okay, so
now,
what we're talking about is a toll project.
Yeah, that's a toll project, absolutely. Now, you and I know that company from Spain has run the numbers, and they're probably going to get $15 or $20 billion back, not trillion, billion.
Yeah, exactly, off their investment. And that's the way business works in general, is you want a return on your investment, period.
Of course.
And you want a good return on your investment.
Of course, yes.
So if they will finance it, they reap the rewards.
That's right.
Okay, and so that's kind of the direction you're going with infrastructure.
Well, I would go that direction on certain projects. Once again, it's a quasi deal. You know, you look at TVA. A lot of folks don't remember what our grandparents went through, but the electric co-ops would not come into the Tennessee Valley because we were so poor. They said, we can't pay the electric bill. And so without TVA, we wouldn't have had electricity here in the Tennessee Valley.
That's interesting, too, and that's a good point that a lot of liberals will rest on, in the sense of TVA was kind of the landmark of hydroelectricity. And the idea of you can turn water movement. We have a lot of water in Tennessee.
Absolutely.
We can turn water movement into electricity. Watch us roll. And it's going to require a lot of infrastructure investment.
Right.
But when we do so, we'll have dams, we'll have all kinds of ways to channel water and to turn it into electricity. And that's what they did. And they became a model for the government. I mean, that's where you get ideas like the Hoover Dam and things like this from. Is the TVA set the mold.
They did. They did. And so I'd like to kind of return to that. There are certain projects that are, billions of dollars that would completely bust the bank, that we don't need to borrow the money for, but where we could bring private industry in, those big projects. But the other projects, I think we need to stay with the current model that we have now.
Well, Steve, I'm going to tell you that sounds very Republican to me. But,
well,
but I also think it sounds very sound, and that's where I come from on my own position. Is government needs to be contracting with people, and this is a little bit off of what we talked about earlier. But if that's the case, how do you feel about the Project Labor Agreement Act?
Okay.
The idea of the Project Labor Agreement Act basically sets union standards for anybody who is going to contract with federal government, which usually, on the large scale end, if you're looking at a macro end, will turn into a bunch of wasted money through federal nonsense. That's you got to pay all these workers $30 an hour instead of $15. And you're going to have to hire more workers and cover these quotas. It becomes inefficient. You waste a bunch of taxpayer money. With the Project Labor Agreement Act in place, which it is and has been for a while now. I mean, that's where we run into bogging down on pretty much any kind of infrastructure problem. And that's why it costs so much. Is we're basically taking any kind of union standard and using that as the litmus test for whether we're going to allow these contracts or not. So if somebody puts in a bid and says, we're willing to do this, if the federal government is sponsoring it instead of Florida and the state of Orlando, in your example, the issue is no, that's not going to cut it. You're going to do double that. Because you have to pay all these workers a union wage, you have to use union standards, you have to do all these things. Do you not see that as something that bogs us down? And would you be, and this is the really strong question, would you be interested, or I guess almost motivated to get rid of the Project Labor Agreement Act and to actually let the free market decide on what labor should be in the process through the federal government?
So that's.
Or what about a revision? To the act. It sounds like there's too much.
Yes. A revision is possible too. Yeah, and that's what I'm asking.
I'm guessing there's good things in there too. Honestly, I haven't read the
well, the good thing is it protects workers. It does, but I mean, to the detriment of the tax
unions in general,
and to the detriment of the people who are actually involved, because most of those contracts are going to get turned away. They're not going to fit. These businesses now are not interested, you have a huge problem there. So, as he asked, would you be interested in a revision of the Project Labor Agreement Act or a repeal of it entirely?
Absolutely. I think that certainly would be willing to look at that. Now, let me just say this about labor unions in general. I think that there is no doubt that you can't prove a correlation between stagnant wages in this country and the decline of unions in this country. Remember, I told you that the average income in the 4th Congressional District is $33,000 a year. Now, can you imagine if we didn't have UAW here?
You're boosting that.
And that's right. It makes $20,000 a year.
You'll find me as a strange conservative libertarian who is actually in favor of unions.
Right.
Because he works for one.
Yeah.
We're going to leave that out. I don't want my employment involved.
I'm not saying.
But at the same time, that I do actually believe in unions to the degree that they do. A collective bargaining agreement is not a bad thing. When you have massive multinational corporations, as workers, really the smart move is to come together to negotiate with them.
Right. But when you look at a lot of these trade agreements too, I was very fortunate to receive the endorsement of the AFL-CIO last time and of the UAW. And really the main reason with the AFL-CIO, the biggest reason was because I was against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, the one reason why, one reason though, it's a very simple reason why I was against that, because we didn't know what was in it.
Yeah.
How can you possibly support something when you don't know what it contains?
Smells like we're going to go on healthcare, but
right. So those types of issues. But I'm definitely look. No one likes waste, fraud, and abuse.
And that's a huge problem with the federal government. And I think anybody who has their eyes at least half open recognizes that every time you advocate for letting the federal government run something, you're ignoring the problem of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well, I don't think that you're ignoring that, but I think that there has to be back again a quasi. I believe that we should allow the workers of Tennessee and America to decide on their own. We had Volkswagen come into Chattanooga.
And they pushed the union.
And the Germans are very used to unions. They were like, what do you mean you don't have a union here in Tennessee, know? And so that caused it. But if the people there
and the workers rejected it.
The workers rejected it. Nissan has rejected it. But I can tell you that UAW here.
I would say Nissan is not the same as the Volkswagen.
Some of those companies have a little bit better
Nissan's
culture
very anti-union and do a damn good job of being anti-union. That's their thing.
But one of the big things with Nissan that's going on now are the temporary workers.
Oh yeah, same thing with General Motors too. Is that General Motors actually has a hiring plan, but it changes all the time. Right. And any GM worker who's a temp worker who's been there for a year and still a temp worker will tell you they were promised employment after 3 months, and it's now been an extra 9 months, and they don't have shit. Right. Pardon my French, but
no, it's okay. These are the types of issues, though, that are keeping these wages down. And people, once again, back to your point, does the government interfere and say you must? I have a son that's 20 years old. He's a sophomore at the University of Tennessee. He came home this summer. He went to work at Amazon at the fulfillment center.
Yes, sir.
They started this kid off at $13 an hour. That's
not bad for a 20-year-old.
That's far
really not great for a 30-year-old
wage, right? So in a lot of ways, the market will regulate itself. As far as the labor pool and what goes out there. So as a Democrat, I'd want to leave the door open for these situations where there may be a quasi-governmental program that can help boost these types of things. So,
but also has benefit for the government, but also has benefit for the workers.
Of course,
sure.
Right.
Okay, and if we can leave that a little bit, I guess my next question. And I'm sorry, I'm dominating.
Do we want to pivot to minimum wage?
Well, that's what I'm about to do. Actually, yes. I saw that you advocate for a living wage, and I mean, I don't think anybody in the world, or especially not in this country, is going to say a living wage is not a problem.
Right.
My question becomes, how do you wish to accomplish that?
Sure.
Do you want to do so by setting a federal minimum wage standard, or do you want to do so through regulating employment or employer incentives like profit sharing? Do you want to take a company like GM and say, we're not going to tell you what a minimum wage has to be on a federal level, but what we are going to say is if you're going to do business in our district, you must profit share, and you must profit share by these realms. This is the standard. Or how do you think that you can affect?
How about a third way? How about the earned income tax credit that's out there? Ro Khanna is a liberal from California that's pushing that, and he's saying if we increase the earned income tax credit out there, it's essentially the same as raising someone's wage because they're going to be allowed to keep more of their taxed income.
I have so many thoughts on that as a libertarian, but I'm going to leave it alone because I feel like we're going to go way deep in the weeds. We're going to start talking about income taxation is theft.
Right.
But anyway,
well, who loves taxes, right? Nobody loves taxes.
No one loves taxes, and we don't want to see them raised.
Right.
And no one wants to see them raised.
But if we can increase the deductions for the average middle class and lower the poor, the people that fall below poverty, where they can actually keep more of what they earn, I think that's certainly a way that I would be open to looking to as well. Back to should the federal government mandate what the wage is? Well, we've already crossed that that bridge.
Well, we have, but right now we're at a very stagnant $7.25 an hour.
Absolutely.
And that's not going to cut it.
How long has it been since we've raised that?
That was, I want to say that was like early Bush times, or even before that.
I want to say yes.
But that begs me a question of, it's been sitting there at $7.25, and that's clearly not cutting it.
Right.
$7.25 an hour is not a livable wage.
Right.
And if you disagree with me, I have choice words for you.
Right.
You are wrong. 720, even with a single family or I guess a single family household or something where you have two people, adults working together without children, $7.25 an hour is not sustainable in a modern city or a metropolitan city.
Or
it's
even
not.
rural Tennessee. Back to the 4th district.
You might be able to get away with it in rural Tennessee, but oh man, maintenance on upkeep on vehicles and whatnot.
Oh my gosh. Well,
$33,000
a year. How do people pay rent? How do they buy food? How do they put braces on their children?
Yeah, and see now again, that was just me talking about without children. With children, it's
a whole different.
It's impossible to survive on 2 incomes and $7.25 an hour.
Absolutely,
it's not going to happen.
Right. So we have to find a reasonable solution to this. You know, Alan Greenspan came out recently and he said we are leaving. We've been in stagnation for about a decade. Ever since we bailed the banks out, which I was against, by the way.
Yeah, cheers. Y'all did it to yourselves. That's your problem.
And so what that did was that decreased the value of our currency. It decreased our purchasing power.
Well, we have no idea what the value of our currency actually is because we won't audit the Fed. But again, we're going to go libertarian.
So I agree with you on that. We should audit the Fed. You know, Bernie Sanders agrees with that.
Yes, he did, and that is a big plus for you.
Absolutely. So, we need to know.
What is our money worth?
Well, people don't realize that the Fed is not actually the Fed, right? It's private
It
banks.
is, and it's a made up system that we're not privy to the details.
That's
which I think is ridiculous. Because it's our money and we work for it and we earn it.
I definitely support sound money. Yeah, so I will say that. But yeah, we lowered the value. We devalued our currency when we bailed the banks out. In addition to that, we put the taxpayers for the first time on the hook for a lot of private industry that was out there, especially the banking industry.
Yes.
And so I disagree with that as well. However, so if you know, laissez-faire, do you really believe in a free capitalist system?
I do.
This is one of the things that where once again the government intervened here, and I don't think that we should have, and it would have been extremely painful. But I think a decade later, had AIG failed, had all of these banks failed, it would have been extremely painful on the economy for the United States. But I think that it would have healed. What we have done is kick the can down the road.
I guess
for
the question
last 10 years.
Should the federal government prop up our economy in that sense?
Right. So I'm with you on that.
When you have major failures across the board, is it our responsibility as citizens, or even our responsibility as the federal government alone, to spend our taxpayer dollars by the billions, if not trillions, to prop up these ultra-capitalist systems that have failed?
Right. Now, this is where the Democrat comes out in me. Why did they fail? Was it because of the regulations that weren't in place? Was it because we didn't have the proper system and congressional oversight of how these things were operated?
That's okay. Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that it's, at least in my opinion, I wouldn't say that it's a matter of these regulations failed. I would say the problem is that we as a country, especially in the liberal era since Bill Clinton, what we've done is we've micromanaged problems without looking at the macro element. What we've done is we've thrown out regulations on a very micro level that says, okay, I see this one problem, let's put federal law in place that addresses it. Yes. And we do this across the board over and over and over again. And now they conflict, and we don't know what the hell is going on. And we create all these problems that on a macro level we could have solved with simpler regulations on a larger scale.
Yes, so I think that you and I could probably agree on that. However, I think it is important for the federal government to oversee, especially these larger corporations and the larger banks and the lending practices that were going on. You know, even now with the Equifax, with the data breach. So that's my consumer issue. Is data security.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah. I mean, I'm a victim of the Equifax breach. I know it. I bought a brand new car in March, and Equifax was the person that ran, or the organization that ran it.
There's a friend of my girlfriend's had someone try to open like a dozen credit card.
No one's tried that on me
yet. You know, in their name, and it's because of the Equifax breach.
Exactly,
like, it's ridiculous.
It's terrible, and thankfully Tennessee law is somewhat consumer-based in the sense that if you wanted to file under Tennessee law, that we have rules that protect consumers, and that you could sue Equifax for it. But the question becomes, what is the remedy in that situation? I mean, how do I sue Equifax and actually come up with a remedy if I've never had my identity stolen? Like, but you put me at risk of it. I mean, all of the dark web now has my social security number and every detail ever about me.
So data theft is the #1 concern of almost every consumer that's out there.
Absolutely.
And we need to remember too, we hear about the hacks, we hear about, Guccifer and these Eastern Europeans and the Chinese and all of these people, that are coming in, and I want to speak about that for just a second too.
Sure.
But the companies that are acquiring our data should have a responsibility to protect our data.
Yes.
I think that is the bottom line.
I think that shouldn't even be a question. That should be simple law.
And so
that's understood under common law for
absolutely
however long. If you're the arbiter of these things, you're responsible for it.
So if someone if I write my Social Security down on a piece of paper over there, and you take your cell phone camera and you snap a picture of that, do you guys consider that data theft as well? Like I said, absolutely. And so
who's the actor? I mean, legally speaking, it comes down to who is responsible.
That's exactly right. And so it's not just the massive data breaches, but we need to protect consumers all the way across the board.
Yes.
If we're going to move, and we seem to be moving to a cashless currency, even though I'm not sure I believe in that.
Oh,
I'm the world's worst.
Like Bitcoin and things
well,
like that?
I'm the world's worst about using a debit card and never carrying cash.
Well, no, you're not the world's worst. Trust me, I'm on the same page. I'm a libertarian through and through, and I still operate digitally most of the time.
Right.
I mean, I have cash, but normally it goes into a bank account. I try to pay my taxes and do my thing,
If we're going to live in this world, we have to protect people's data. And do everything we can from a regulation standpoint, from a responsibility standpoint, to make sure that our citizens are protected.
I think that's a great point.
Now, let me talk about one other thing while we're talking about this. It creeps me out, guys, that the Russians can reach through Facebook. There's my hand reaching through Facebook, manipulate people's minds. That is scary stuff.
I completely agree. You saw, and I was going to ask you about that since you brought it up anyway. Did you see Ben Sass's tirade? I guess he went against Richard Spencer, the white nationalist.
Yes.
Well, for lack of a better word, I'm going to put it fuckwad.
Yeah.
But that guy, I heard a lot of pushback from Trump conservatives, especially.
Sure.
That said, well, he wants to be childish on Facebook. What's the difference?
Here's the thing, guys. We know that there are foreign governments that are attempting to manipulate our citizens. Whether it's right, left, whichever way it is, it's wrong. And
I think the proof shows that the Russians have manipulated both sides, and they've tried to be divisive in pushing strong progressive liberal messages towards Bernie and things like this, and strong conservative
that's sort of what's motivated this. I mean, even
to create
before the
division.
election, is to try and heal some of those divisions and those misgivings. That's
why I agreed to come on you guys' show, because
that is our goal in general. Is to have an open discussion about these things. And
we
come to a
have
point.
to overcome this. We have to be cognizant that foreign governments are trying to manipulate your mind through social media. And so let's be cognizant of that. Let's overcome that. Let's continue to have a civil dialogue between every side in this country. And that's really what I stand for. Let me say this while I'm at this too. One of my pledges, campaign pledges, and I know, say politicians make a lot of promises. Well, I'm going to give one I'm going to give you two that I promise you that I'm going to keep. One of those pledges is to hold open quarterly meetings in the district.
Town hall type.
Town hall meetings. Republicans can come in. Democrats can come in. I'll answer any question anytime. And so I know that sounds very simplistic.
Marsha Blackburn said the same thing. That didn't work out for well.
I promise you guys.
Or Desjardins, actually.
Desjardins. We haven't seen Desjardins in a long time. And so that was one of the things, I really wanted to debate Desjardins last time. I really wanted to draw him out. And politically speaking, they did the right thing. basically ignore us like we didn't exist.
Sure, and I mean, you know,
Right.
as far as fair campaigning goes, I would agree with that.
Sure.
So this shouldn't be an attack thing or smearing one person versus the other.
Of course.
We care about what you think.
I believe
How
that-
are you going to help Americans and
Right.
Tennesseans in the 4th District?
Right, and I believe that Americans are owed that. They're owed an open debate from their representatives, no matter which side they represent. The American people should be accessible to their representatives, and so that's one campaign promise that I'll keep. Can I give you a second one?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. I will not accept money from the pharmaceutical industry, not one penny. I will not accept money from the health insurance industry, not one penny. Will not accept money from the defense industry or the banking industry. When I talk to Tennesseans over the last 16 months, what they will tell you, everyone will say, you'll say, what's wrong with politics today? They'll say money.
Yeah, Americans
Special
United.
interest. Right, Citizens
Or not
United.
Americans United, Citizens United. I apologize. Yep, that was.
That was a miss. Okay,
Yep,
it's fine.
sorry. I'm thinking Scalia and not you know, atheists, but my mistake.
Yeah, right. But that is the problem, is the special interest, right? Special
Yes.
interest, big Republican donors like the Koch brothers, big Democrat donors that are out there. You know, we've tried to keep the vast majority of the money that we've raised. And remember, I told you it was a fraction of what a typical congressional candidate raises.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm proud of that because my loyalty is with the people here. I'm the only candidate born and raised in the state of Tennessee. I want to serve the people here. I don't want to serve the corporate masters in Washington, the Democratic donors in Nashville. I want to serve the people here. And so what our candidacy is trying to give the people what they say they truly want, which is a candidate that hasn't been bought and paid for by the special interest. And I promise you I'll keep those two campaign promises, open meetings and keeping the money out of
Well,
politics.
brother, I'm gonna tell you something. If you become a U.S. congressman, hold your feet to the fire.
You got it,
You
man.
really will.
You got it.
Oh yes,
We
no,
do-
that,
we
that's
do-
a huge thing.
We do a YouTube hangout every Wednesday.
Yeah.
And people who have found our ire, they get to hear all of it.
Yeah,
So,
and
sure,
we
we'll
invite
hold
them
you to
on,
it.
and we have
Yeah.
commenters and different people that come on and talk about this. And
Sure.
I'm gonna tell you what, if you do become U.S. congressman, I will hold your feet to the fire for as long as you hold that office for that.
I would not expect anything less. And let me say this too, I would only serve 2 terms. After the 3rd term, the congressman become eligible for a $100,000 a year lifetime salary. Okay? So that's why people say, Steve, don't say that. Don't put, what if you get up there? You're doing a great job.
I
We
thought you
want
said you
to
were a
stay.
libertarian. Take your money.
I'll come back home after 2 terms. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in Washington, D.C. Tennessee is my home. My wife Shelley's here today. Our children are here. Our family is here. We want to go up there and serve the people. And I know that if we do a good job, if we're honest, if we follow the rules, that people will take care of me when I come home. Tennesseans will take care of me if I do the right thing. And so I honestly believe that, and I expect you to hold my feet to the fire. And I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't expect anything less.
I love to hear that. That's exactly the kind of thing that really just fires up the American.
So you're also interested in limiting the number of terms that you would be involved in there. You want a couple of terms in there.
A couple of terms. That's a self-imposed term limit.
Sure, but what? How do you feel about an actual regulations?
They'll never vote it in, guys. We know that.
Oh, sure.
We know that. So you're going to have to put candidates up there that are going to keep
they
their
will.
pledge.
I tend to disagree with you. With Donald Trump, we have Donald Trump. Donald J. Trump is the president of the United States.
Sure.
Don't guess what we'll vote for.
Well, maybe so.
Hang on
yeah.
now. Let reality check.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's,
We
that's
are
probably a
very
good point.
anti-politician at this point. So you have to keep that in mind, is that it may be in your own self-interest for the next 2 terms to vote against that 3rd term. You know?
Well, trust me, I would.
I would assume that you're.
But
I
it'll
would take
never
you as a man
come
as your word. You said that.
Let's be honest. It'll never come up. It'll never get to the floor. If it does, I'll vote for term limits. I promise you that. But you and I both know.
Man, I'm just going to disagree with you there. I would have told you that it would never have ever become an issue on a national level that we would hire a celebrity reality TV host.
Well, I hope it comes up
to
so
be the
that
president
I
of the United States of America.
I hope it comes up so that I can vote for term limits. Let me put it that way.
Okay, sure.
Absolutely.
David, before I segue into healthcare, I was going to ask you, do you have an issue you want to touch on before I start going hammering on that one?
Well, not really. I mean, just I had just sort of we've touched here and there on different aspects of it already, but like, how do you get across that? How do you go into the ultra red county? And they know you've got the instant.
This is Murray County. This is 75%. You're sitting in Murray County right now. You're 75% Republican.
Absolutely.
Hands down, not even a question.
And if you have a D next to your name and they know that,
you're already getting voted across.
That's a death sentence automatically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you do?
Well, that's the tough part, right? We have to go to the Republic. Here's the thing. They're 75% red right now. For the last 100 years, they were 75% blue. Okay.
Sure.
They're all old Democrats.
We could talk about what that means too in terms of racism and Jim Crow and things like that.
That's something that the Democrats can't deny.
It's not necessarily that.
But let me say this. You know why there's a balanced budget in the state of Tennessee? Democrats. That's why.
True. Phil Bredesen helped with that. And I think Bill Haslam gets a lot of shit for being too blue and too liberal, but
I agree with you.
But the man continuously increases our surplus. I mean, we're sitting on a $2 billion surplus, and now the libertarian me bristles so hard against our gas tax
and things like that. Money back.
Well, it's not even wanting to get the money back. It's more about how much is too much. Like, yes, I understand the idea of saving money and building more money, but why are we going to tax citizens even more when we don't need to?
Right. Okay.
If you want your college program, you have $2 billion. You can pay for that. That's affordable. And you'll still have $1 billion left over. Why are we increasing taxes to do that?
So the road tax. A lot of folks, as far as the infrastructure goes, they don't realize that the only source of income for our highways is the gas tax.
Oh, I do understand that. I do.
But a lot of people don't.
Right, and a lot of people don't understand that, and so a lot of folks said, "Hey, let's borrow from the general fund." But maybe one of the reasons why we have such
the money goes back into the general fund. That's the problem.
Well, right. I agree. I'd rather have truth in taxation, where if I tax you for gas,
it goes into a gas
on the road.
Yes.
Right. I totally believe in that. But maybe one of the reasons too why we have such a surplus is maybe we are underfunding, say, education. Maybe that's part of the problem that's out there.
And he was trying to address that. Mr. Haslam or Governor Haslam, and
that's right.
Not only that, but our legislature was trying to address that.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
That becomes an issue to me, though, is you can afford what you're trying to address.
Right.
Why are you raising taxes?
Right.
Especially when you could afford across the board, based on our own taxation rate that exists and the fact that we are consistently adding money to that surplus.
Sure.
Why are we spending more? Why are we taking more money from workers? And I know that the argument that Governor Haslam put forward was we're taxing out-of-state people more because truckers and everybody.
Very valid.
We have a hubbub
up to 40%.
We've got a hub of interstates that meet in Nashville, and that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taxing truck drivers coming out of state.
Right.
Does that really give a business-friendly idea to the state of Tennessee? And on top of that, what happens to the guy like me who drives a lot? I live in rural Tennessee.
So
I practice all over Middle Tennessee.
Right.
I'm in Court and Davidson County, Williamson County, Murray County, Lawrence County, Giles County, all the way up to Cheatham County.
Sure.
And this is a constant basis.
Sure.
And I drive, and I don't increase my fees that I charge criminal defendants based on how far I have to drive. So why are you, or not you, but why is Governor Haslam and our legislature doing this to us? Because I pay those gas taxes too.
Sure. So the Improve Act is what you're talking about that recently passed.
Yes.
So if you look, it was basically revenue neutral. What they did was they shifted the grocery tax over to the gas tax. By lowering the grocery tax, on average, it was about a $7 a month savings.
How much did you change the grocery tax? My understanding is the sales. Okay, so now it's 8.75 for groceries.
I think that's what it's going to. Yes,
9.25.
And so it's about 0.5%. And so what that translates to for most Tennessee families is about $7 of savings per month.
And that includes our fuel.
Okay, so when you add it to when you increase the gas tax, what you did was increase the cost of about $4 per month. So on general,
so you're saying we're $3 savings.
About a $3 net to Tennessee families. So it was essentially just shifting.
Forgive me if I don't agree with that system.
That's okay. Yeah, I understand.
What really happened to me was I didn't notice a difference in my grocery spending.
Sure.
I certainly noticed a difference in my gas spending.
Really? You've noticed 2 cents? You've noticed 2 cents?
Oh, yes. Well, I also drive a Cadillac, and it's turbocharged and requires premium fuel.
Okay.
And, yeah, I'm eating it.
But 2 cents, that's what, so far, it was 2 cents spread out over 3 years.
And now when
I think
that recently, since that's happened too, we've had several major hurricanes, especially the one in Houston, that led to a national increase in gas prices in general.
So that has nothing to do with the tax then?
Right. Right.
So,
that tax doesn't change. It's flat. It doesn't. It's not on a.
And you drive a fancy car.
Well, we're talking about the optics don't look good. I don't.
Right, but we care more about facts than optics, right?
But,
that's part of what we're doing here.
Do we?
Yes, we do.
Here we go.
I think a lot of things we do.
The bipartisanship is breaking down.
This is what happens is we'll have a guest on, and he and I will end up getting into it worse.
Well, sure, but that's a good question though. Is that I'm noticing it, and I'm not the only one who's noticing it. And I think my question is, again, it goes back to your point that you want to increase infrastructure to draw people into this state.
To create
jobs. But we're
jobs.
punishing out-of-state people, especially truck drivers, by increasing their taxes.
Sure.
And what the hell does a guy from Georgia who's driving a truck that has to go to Michigan every year?
Right.
You know, like he's going back and forth every month or whatever to Michigan. And
well,
he's
just
eating
for the record, just for the record, Georgia just recently increased their gas tax.
They did too.
Florida.
Yeah.
22 states.
Well, I guess actually this morning we'd be talking, driving from Arkansas to North Carolina or something where you're going to take the long route through Tennessee.
Sure.
Because we're a very squished state.
We are.
So it's easier to go north to south than it is to go east to west. You're looking at an 8-9 hour drive going from east to west.
Sure.
You're looking at 2.5 to go across the top of the state.
Right.
But my question there is, again, is that business friendly, and are you supporting businesses that are out of state when they have to eat that drive for 8 or 9 hours?
Right, and we know the reality of that. That's not happening. People are not changing their route to go through so they avoid the 2 cents.
I agree with you because they're not we centralize a lot of interstates and they're going to have to do it.
They have to pass through Tennessee, and so it's just like tourism though too. A big part of that is tourism when folks come here. One of a lot of the things that have happened. It's like, one of the things I didn't agree with state government was the recent estate tax. I forgot what it was called, the hall tax. Okay, so that was the one that repealed the tax on investments that were over $1 million in the state of Tennessee. Want to guess how many people in the 4th district are going to that make over $1 million?
I would say there's probably 10 of them.
Yeah, right. We could probably count.
Yeah, and honestly. At some point, this is the way I feel about it in general, is when you make above a certain threshold, pay your taxes.
Right.
Like that's the privilege of being rich in this country is that you've
benefited the most.
Yes, and I feel that way about estate tax.
Absolutely.
And I feel that way about the hall tax.
But let me go at how this rolls downhill, okay? So they repealed the hall tax. I heard Democrat reps, Sharon K. Edwards out of Bedford County, she was going around preaching. She said if they repeal this hall tax, your property taxes are going to go up in Bedford County. Now, no one would vote for her because she had a D. Right, because this was state funding that was going to be reduced to Bedford County. Now in Bedford County, the cops can't afford squad cars. So guess what? The property taxes are going to go up in Bedford County. Okay,
so Spring Hill about that.
So as we devolve federally, the cost and the needs are still going to be there. And so what happens is it's getting passed down to state and then to local. And so the local
But as a constitutional republic that is really a confederation of states, isn't it really kind of the burden on the state and not the federal government who deals with this?
Well, so let's talk about infrastructure for that, for example. Roads are political. We know that. They always have been. The governor who carries the state, whichever areas carry the state, that's who gets the projects.
Oh, yes.
It's been like that for years.
Of course.
If you voted against the government, you can't expect a new highway in your district, right?
Yes, and I agree with you, and that's a sham.
And so if we devolve into these block grants, let's say, the governor's going to say, well, he's going to really decide, so the federal government has a role in making sure that it's equitably spent throughout the state.
Sure.
And so that's why I believe that the federal government still has to be involved in a lot of these projects, especially interstate projects.
Well, they should. Well, of course, with interstate projects, the Interstate Commerce Clause is triggered. You have to.
There's that. Yes. Of course they do.
Yeah, exactly. As if the interstate is the same interstate that moves from state to state,
right?
That's federal funding.
Absolutely. Now let's move on back to the Improve Act real fast.
Sure.
So most of these formulas are 80-20. The state has to come up with 20% of the funding.
And the federal government has to eat 80%.
Right. So Donald Trump comes out and says, I'm going to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure. And by the way, the need is about $3 trillion.
At least.
At a minimum. We are so far behind. I've been fortunate to travel all over the world. We are being surpassed by other countries.
I spent 10 years in New Orleans.
Yes.
I can already tell you that infrastructure is garbage.
Right.
And it's terrible. And Tennessee isn't much better, but we are markedly better. But at the same time, but we still have bridges failing. We still have dams failing. We still have problems.
Sure.
I mean, these are
projects that don't ever end.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, good God, look at I-65 corridor between Nashville and Spring Hill.
Right.
How long have we been working on that?
Help me build that
20
train.
years?
Let's build that train through a P3. Let's get it to the Williamson County line. We'll let the Congress...
I had a quick question for you on that.
Sure.
Above ground or below ground?
Above ground.
Above.
Yeah, above ground. Yeah.
I think you have to be above ground.
And
I have to agree with him on that. You don't. Below ground is unfathomable cost of digging tunnels.
I grew up around DC, and just because of the level of development already in those areas,
they had to go.
They went with an original plan that was above ground.
Oh, did they?
And it ended up being extremely problematic traffic-wise.
Well, sure.
But I think some of those logistics are pretty different.
Though, as far as interstate
but I know it's a hot button issue.
And I was going to talk about this too. This is something that CSX has pushed, and this is something you're going to see a huge Teamster pushback on. Mm-hmm. We don't need semis on interstate travel. You can run rail lines by the tens alongside interstates that do not cross under them or over them, that run our freight alongside.
And what's going to happen to the Highway Trust Fund when we...
and that becomes the issue is that you really hurt truck drivers.
Absolutely.
But truck drivers would only be forced to be local. They're not doing interstate travel anymore because you could efficiently and easily and much more profitably as a corporation like CSX or anybody, UPS or somebody who's shipping, run these things on rails along the ground, along an interstate. Yeah. I mean, I-65 from what is it, Alabama all the way to Michigan, you could run products
right up the
on rails. Yeah. You could have 10 rails sitting next to each other on one side of the interstate and run them along the interstate and go either over or under entrance and exits. And you would never see another semi-truck on the interstate again.
I agree.
Which, as somebody who's dabbled in personal injury and everything else, I can tell you that's beneficial to the whole.
Absolutely.
But it really hurts one industry.
Right. And
truck drivers are going to be hurt hard.
Why hasn't that happened? Right.
Because you have lobbyists and people who are going to get in there for the trucking industry.
Well, we basically have monopoly still with the rail system. Okay. We don't really
CSX
have a free
runs
market.
Our world.
That's right. In Norfolk Southern, we really don't have a free market there. Right?
But they want that, but they still can't push it. I mean, they've been pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, but they can't get it done because you have the Teamsters and everybody else who are going to raise money and put their foot down.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that, but I would certainly love to see us improve our cargo transit by train.
I think we could.
And to answer your question, David, now really where I want to go next when the Democrat comes out, I want to build one of those. I could see a German company coming into Murray County and Rutherford County, that magnetic train that's zero carbon emissions that runs off of magnets.
Oh, okay. Look, I'm about that life. Yeah. Like, I'm okay with that.
Let's build that. Let's have the German company come in and build that, and then you and we can all pay $3 a trip to go to downtown Nashville in the next 20 years.
Yeah, but my argument against that's going to be that did not work out well for Europe or anybody else. If you've ever been in Europe and traveled during their holidays and whatnot, they use a fluctuation price system that it's impossible to travel around Christmas time because it's 10 times the rate that it is normally. Mm-hmm. What would have been a $20 trip from Paris to, say, Berlin is now a $2,800 trip from,
right. And so what
you're talking about that pricing model.
You're talking about
but that's how they survive and that's how they pay for it.
Right.
And that pricing model needs to exist to pay the incentives to the companies that built it.
Well, it needs to be a pricing model.
And I'm saying, how do you balance the pricing model and make it affordable?
I think really we have to distinguish between commuter trains and passenger trains that carry us long distances. I'm talking about commuter trains. I'm talking about very short lines here that you can go
like
to
they had in Chicago or DC.
Yeah, sure.
These kinds of subways.
Those are also bastions of criminal behavior and really unsafe areas in major metropolitan areas. People are afraid to ride the subway. People are afraid to get on transit.
I was just in Chicago this summer. I didn't have any fear of anything. I grew up around DC.
But you are not a commuter. You are a visitor. And you're just like, hey, look, let me get on this train a couple times. no big deal. What happens when it's your day in and day out and you're really afraid for your personal safety?
Well, that's a public safety issue, and it shouldn't inhibit us from doing the right thing from an infrastructure standpoint. And let me say this too, it's not just trains, and it's not just extending capacity. We have to have intermodal. We need to think big. We need to think trains, cars, back to your point, cargo, bikes, walking trails.
Yeah, infrastructure, real infrastructure.
All of that needs to be incorporated into our smart growth plans. Let me give you Rutherford County, and I know that Murray County is growing. I think Murray County
is, but it's not 4. Rutherford County. Rutherford County has 27,000 residents at a time just based on school.
Let me tell you what's going to happen in Rutherford County based on the census in the next 40 years. The entire 4th Congressional District is 750,000 people, 16 counties. Mm-hmm. The projection in the next 40 years in Rutherford County is 750,000 people in Rutherford County.
Wow. And that's based on MTSU's wonderful growth, and they've become a great
and many reasons, right? Lots of reasons. But you're talking about compressing an entire congressional district into one county. Only 40 years from now, if we don't have a multifaceted, comprehensive, intermodal infrastructure plan, I can tell you right now, man, people in Rutherford County are hot already.
Oh, yeah, no, trust me. When I have cases in Rutherford County, I really hate having to plan an hour and a half ahead of time to go 40 minutes.
Yes.
Sure. And that's just to get downtown to the courthouse. Right. And I have nowhere to friggin' park. And I spend money out of my pocket just to park. And these are for appointed cases where no one's going to, the state of Tennessee is never going to actually reimburse me.
Right.
They promise it, but they don't.
But we have to think big. And for the next 40 years, I'm not going to be here. You guys won't be here 40 years from now. Probably. I don't know. You guys are younger than me.
Well, I smoke cigarettes, so maybe not. But I intend to be here.
I owe this to my children.
I love this area, and I will be here.
Well, I hope I am 40 years from now. I'd be about 90 years old. But we owe this to our children, our grandchildren, our progeny.
I agree with you.
We owe to start planning for this now. And if we don't, people, you hear this all the time in Spring Hill, in Murray County, in Columbia. People say, why didn't they plan for this? Why did they let these developers just go wild and not plan the infrastructure? Why didn't we have for the money for the school systems? And we can't just continue to build until we're planning for this growth.
Okay.
And so I call that smart growth, comprehensive growth. And so I really want to, on a congressional level, pay attention for that. And let me just say, in the last 7 years, we have had no advocacy on a federal level for that. Zero.
No. In Tennessee, I agree.
Well, even in the 4th Congressional District. Congressman Desjardins has voted against the highway bill 7 times.
Yeah.
He won't even sign the letter that says we need sustainable infrastructure. In Rutherford County, he said we need. I wouldn't have built the walking path, the greenway in Murfreesboro. I shouldn't have built that. Charities should have built that. Now imagine a charity.
I agree with him, but
okay, so you do. But imagine a charity dealing with the National Park Service at the Stones River battlefield there, or the easements in the electrical companies, or the water easements of the Stones River that runs through there.
And I think the issue comes back to the National Project Labor Agreement Act. Okay. And it really doesn't have much to do with, our argument here is charity is the best way to do it, to try to circumvent that.
Uh-huh.
Because a charity is not beholden to that. If a charity wants to pay the money to pay somebody $15 an hour, they don't have to pay them $30 an hour under the National Project Labor Agreement Act. But you have the issue of the bureaucratic red tape of the federal government is going to actually bring them back and still say, well, we're not going to give you access. If you had done it with the federal government, that would have been fine. But you would have to pay everybody 3 times as much. And
maybe so. But I think in the current state that we're in, the most pragmatic way would be to work. If we waited on charities to build a greenway here in Columbia, we'll still be waiting. Right?
I agree with you. I agree with you.
We won't have a greenway, and so I think that's important. Like I said, it's an important part of intermodal, comprehensive plan for infrastructure, and so I believe that is a legitimate function of our government.
Now let me ask you this, like to try to I guess paraphrase what you're saying is
sure.
What you're saying is you're open to cutting some of the regulations in the National Project Labor Agreement Act or something like that in the interest of efficiency, in the interest of actually,
of course,
because that needs to happen, and liberals for the last 30 years across the board won't touch it because unions are involved and they don't want to step on unions' toes.
Sure.
But You know, and me being a proponent of unions, I'm fine with that. However, you can't have federal regulations that demand union standards for contracts no matter what the contract is, because you're not going to get it done efficiently and you're not going to be able to afford it. And then you're going to have the conservatives on the other end saying, I'm not voting for that because it costs $1.2 trillion to do a $400 million job.
Yeah, so I think you have a very valid point with that. And where, once again, that quasi TVA type of model that comes in is what I call a design, build, and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we do now, a lot of times instead of the state, or there will be certain projects where we will actually ask a private company to submit their bids based on their design and their design build. And so I think that maybe we could look
That's
at
a great idea,
those types of things.
But when Congress, and not just Congress, but when actual federal law requires you to reject their bid based on what they gave you,
Sure.
based on these standards, you're in an impasse. Just because they gave you a good bid, you cannot accept it because there is law that says you can't.
Okay, let me give you an example, and we'll see what you're talking about. The Chickamauga Lock and Dam on the Tennessee River right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a $1.5 billion total project.
Okay.
Now, what has happened is the water in the Tennessee River has become so acidic that it's eating away the concrete
Yes.
that was poured 50 years ago.
I have actually heard about this.
So the federal government has come in and said,
We got to change it.
Right. And so they issued the standards to say you have to use the materials that are not, it's called ASR, alkali silica reactivity.
Okay.
You have to use the materials that will not suffer from ASR, alkali silica reactivity.
And that's understandable because
Sure.
that's an infrastructure investment that makes sense.
Right. So
this isn't based on the price of labor.
You're talking about
based on the
labor.
price of material.
Right.
I'm talking about labor. The National
Right.
Project Labor Agreement Act.
Right.
Which is detrimental, in my opinion, to getting these contracts done.
Okay.
Because everybody knows you can't really argue much about material when you're negotiating a contract as a contractor for a building.
Right.
The room for your overhead, the room for your discussion is in labor.
In the labor, sure.
And it is. And when you have the National Project Labor Agreement Act in place, there's nothing you can do to negotiate your labor because the standard is too high based on who you're going to hire.
Sure.
Because it doesn't matter if you hire scabs or you hire people who are in unions.
Right.
Neither way, you have to pay them union-like wages. And when you hire scabs at union wages, you're going to get scab work at union wages.
Sure.
And that's not helping anybody. What it comes into is just a model of
inefficiency. What do you mean by scab? Are you talking about?
A scab is a term for somebody who is non-union, who will go against union strikes and things like this. Yeah. Non-skilled labor that's not worth the money that you're dumping into it. Or they may be worth the money, but again, you're paying them union wages. They're going to half-ass their work.
Sure.
And that's understood. That's why government is so efficient these days, or inefficient. Government is inefficient because of that. You're paying too much money to laborers who don't give a damn.
So let me tell you, I would be willing to look at that and examine that more, and that's a great issue that you brought up, that I need to educate myself further on that. So I would definitely look at that.
Yeah,
but I understand exactly.
I think that's our biggest barrier.
Okay.
I really do. And as far as infrastructure projects go, I think that's our biggest barrier. Is we should be paying what is a fair wage, not a union wage to anybody who's non-union or whatever. That doesn't come into play in federal realm to me.
Well, that's what, I mean, to what you said earlier, much earlier in the conversation, talking about, being willing to revise.
Exactly.
Take a revise. Let's not throw everything out because there's good protections in there as well.
There are.
If there is waste, if there is
we want to protect.
You're sort of going on record saying that you would be willing to look at that.
Well, absolutely. I would, and let me educate myself further on that. But I will tell you that most of Tennessee's a right-to-work state. Alabama's a right-to-work state. So I can tell you the people building the infrastructure, a fraction are union members. Most of people are not union members.
That's the problem when you have a federal contract
that says
in a right-to-work state, is that we just bypassed the right-to-work state entirely.
Right.
We've gone straight to union standards.
I don't, off the projects that I know, I can't come up with an example where that's happened, where they've said we have to bring union labor in to do this project.
No, you don't have to be union labor. You have to pay union rates, and you have to give union labor benefits.
So let me look into that more, and I'll look into that with some of the experts that I know, especially some of the labor attorneys. But I can't recall that ever being a topic of discussion.
And I'm not even saying that it's a bad system. Essentially, I'm just saying it usually is. It's usually the problem it's usually the barrier you run into, where you will have conservative congressional members that will vote against it because it's not cost effective.
Sure.
You know, it really isn't.
And I think that's the rub of the question, is saying that paying these union rates, that it could be done higher without that.
It could. If you got rid of that standard, you could still pay well.
But is the difference so much that it's becoming not cost effective? You're certain of it. I think that's what needs to be borne out by the numbers.
It is. I mean, it is.
That's what
and it's something that I don't know.
And that goes all the way to why the reason conservatives won't vote for Trump's wall.
Right.
Because if you build Trump's wall, it's under the National Project Labor Agreement Act, and it costs 10 times more than it should have.
About $50 billion.
Exactly, and you could build the damn thing for $14 billion if you didn't have the national. I don't think you should build it, and that's a whole other story. Let's not even get into that.
Right.
But I'm saying that Trump can't get that bill passed because it's subject to those standards, and no one wants to pay for that because it's an outrageous amount of money.
Well, I thought Mexico was going to pay.
Yeah.
Oh, no?
We'll go back to my conservative beliefs, and I've already told you that shit ain't happening.
Right.
But if you'll excuse me for a minute. I know you've got questions you want to ask. I've got to step out for just a second. I'll be right back.
Okay. Let's talk about vouchers. I know this is something that you wanted to have some involvement on.
That's okay. I'll be back for it.
Come back and get into it. What is your take on vouchers? I'm personally extraordinarily anti-vouchers.
Yeah, so am I.
Go ahead.
So we
agree. Okay.
We agree. I can tell you in Rutherford County, Republicans aren't for vouchers. Okay, we have one of the best school systems in the state.
Sure.
Let's say you spend $5,000 per student on average. 10 students go away. That's one teaching position. Furthermore, it's a way to segregate society. And also, when you look at vouchered schools or chartered schools, they don't offer special education. We have a lot of children that are suffering from autism, that are suffering from Asperger's, various issues. And so I know that a lot of people, especially faith-based people, want the voucher system in place. But I'm completely against vouchers and charters. I just think that I'm a product of Tennessee public education, and I think keeping our money in our public school system is the way to go. I'm very proud to be a product of a Tennessee public education.
It's interesting. I'm not from Tennessee originally, but I'm a product of a public education in Virginia, and I absolutely agree that I got a quality education at a public school, and it's completely replicable. I think that the issue is in the way vouchers are sold a lot, and your priority for most is that there are kids in the inner city. The schools are bad. It's not safe. All these things, and the problem that I see, and I know I'm really just preaching to the choir here, that they're taking more money out of systems that are already struggling.
That's right. It makes it seems so counterintuitive that the systems that are struggling, that you take the money out of there. I mean, maybe you look at the administration or you look at the teachers, and then you look at what the federal government and the state governments are pushing down, and really we're testing our teachers as much as we are our students. And so when I was a kid, teachers knew, which children, and that's what I talk about, improving the classroom environment. Teachers knew that some kids were ahead, some kids were behind, and so they had that flexibility to kind of change and use their lesson plan towards the individual needs of the kid. Now it's teach a test. If we don't pass the test, we don't get our funding. If we don't get our funding, we're going to lose teachers, we're going to lose resources, and it just doesn't make sense to me. And we were talking about this earlier about the state of Tennessee and the Promise program, 2 years of free now in the state of Tennessee. No one called Bill Haslam a socialist. I didn't hear that. No one said, "Oh, Governor Haslam's a socialist now that we have 2 free years."
I'm sure there's some dark corners of the internet where that happens, but you really can hear it from folks. That it just seems like good policy. We don't have to ascribe a political ideology to that necessarily.
Let's get people educated that want to be educated. I'm okay with that, but a lot of these are faith-based initiatives. People want to send their child to a Christian school, or a Muslim school, or an atheist school, or there's so many various elements out there. I think you're really opening Pandora's box. And one of the most important lessons that I learned in public school was being around people from different areas, from different cultures, from different backgrounds. And so I believe that helped me adjust as an adult to the real world.
Absolutely.
And so I think there's an important cultural aspect to keeping our public schools going.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's funny that you brought up the Muslim schools. It was actually a Muslim school in Nashville or in the area, and that's one of as a AU guy, Americans United Separation of Church and State. Right. It's one of the arguments that we feel is like, you really want voucher money? You really want your tax dollars going to fund? And I have nothing against Muslims any more than a Christian or anybody else.
Right.
But like, I know that triggers people. They say, well, my tax money is going to promote Islam. Oh, that's a problem in Tennessee now, you know?
Right, and I think actually the truth is the guy that tried to overthrow Turkey recently, it's actually an American citizen, he actually is one of the big voucher proponents in the country. There are more madrasas set up in the country than any other schools. And so I think it's Pandora's box. I think it's a slippery slope. And so I believe we should keep our public schools public. And if parents have the option to send their child to private school or to homeschool their child now, then they have that right to do that. But it's in the best interest of all of us in society to continue to fund our public schools.
Because if they want to go somewhere else, that's their choice. But why should I have to pay for it? Right?
Why should you have to pay for it? You're willing to pay for all kinds of bullshit we don't need, but education you're not really into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. So
See?
Okay, well, you opened a can of worms. You want to hear about it. But then comes the question of, I get that the buzzword voucher program is bad.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, most of the systems put forth so far by the Republican Party are shit. I mean, again, forgive my
That's okay.
But forgive my French. But
too much time in the French Quarter.
Yeah, they're garbage systems. They're garbage systems.
Yeah.
If you were to see a voucher program that actually was kind of income based, or it wasn't just here's a $5,000 credit or whatever, and the rich people, you know, who can afford $15,000 a year for tuition anyway, get $5,000 off, and you know, the bright kids that are born to an impoverished household who can't afford $15,000 a year have a $5,000 credit that means jack shit to them.
Sure.
They can't pull up the other $10,000. Right. You know, if you were to see something more balanced, would you be against it, or because of the word, the voucher buzzword, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think that I would. And let me say this. There are a couple of things, and I've evolved on this. I used to see the world a little bit more conservative, but I have evolved on this because I just believe that we can't find a better solution.
Okay.
Profit. That's what the motive. Essentially, with vouchers, you're creating a
I mean, as much as a nonprofit exists for education, the issue is still going to be profit. The organization must make money to sustain itself.
I couldn't agree more.
It has to.
Right.
Across the board.
Colleges
increase their tuition every year to become more and more onerous in favor of the college and the federal government who funds it because they have to fund their system.
I get it. And I consider myself a capitalist. I do not consider myself a socialist. Like I said, well, you missed this joke earlier. When Governor Haslam put in the Tennessee Promise of 2 free years of college, no one called him a socialist.
I did.
Yeah, did you?
I was right there.
I didn't hear that.
Right? Oh, you want to raise my taxes to pay for college?
In some dark corners of the internet, people work them.
That's not a dark corner.
This is the dark corner.
I'm not a dark corner of the internet. I'm telling you right now. I'm okay with the idea. There was no need for you to increase my taxes to make it happen. We have the money. When you have the money, spend the money. If you don't have the money, don't spend the money. I mean, this is the very basis of personal finance on a state level. If you can afford it, then you can afford it. If you can't afford it, then you can't afford it. Don't spend the money.
But there are some people here that do believe that the reason why we have that surplus is because we're underfunding departments, right? Because we're not actually spending what we should.
Yeah, exactly. And so what is wrong with not increasing my taxes, especially consumer tax that I use day in and day out?
Yeah, right.
What is the issue with actually using the money where it needs to be spent? Because we have the surplus to do so. Can we not just increase the money we spend on education and not screw us? But really, your increase. I mean, and Governor Haslam, I'm talking to you. If you can see me, or you're listening to me, I'm talking directly to you.
You're running for Senate.
You and I have had several conversations in person. We've had dinner together and lunch together. We've talked about this kind of thing. I'm asking you a question right now. Why do you want to increase the money you steal from me for something that you can afford that you should have been spending money on in the first place?
You see what I have to put up with?
No, I mean, that's a reasonable question. And it went to community colleges. I mean, our K through 12 struggles. Why are you spending it on college? Our K through 12 is inadequate already. Why can't we spend it on K through 12?
Employment without post-secondary education, it's extremely struggling.
Well, it was my understanding the vast majority of this came from the lottery and from the
Sure, it did. Oh yeah, no, that's great. And we have a lot of surplus from the lottery. That's great.
Right.
That's why we implemented the lottery in the first place, which we should have.
Which is a voluntary tax.
I'm all about sin taxes.
Right.
And this will take us into, if you want to talk about legalization of drugs or sin taxes on alcohol and tobacco and things like that, I'm okay with those taxes.
Sure.
Those are great ways to do it because you are voluntarily spending money in the system.
That's right.
And that's fine. But my question is, why do we think it's beneficial to have a 2-year associate's program? And we already know bachelors don't even cut it for good paying jobs at this point.
Let me tell you
why. But why an associate program?
Let me tell you.
Want to hang on, but why not spend that money in K through 12?
Yeah,
where we're lacking.
So I think that's really a very valid argument that you're making right there. Very valid. To put more money into the public schools. I totally get that. But let me tell you, in the 4th Congressional District, once again, less than 20% of people have a college education.
Okay, and there's nothing shameful about that.
How are we going to get Apple and Google or biotech or high tech to come here unless we have a skilled workforce? And it wasn't just 2 years of junior college.
Does Apple and Google and all these people require you to have a bachelor's degree to even be employed?
A lot of big corporations do these days.
Well, that's for middle management. I'm asking, as a general employer, I mean, is it really that important to have a bachelor's degree?
Well, maybe not. But a lot of this was also focused at vocational tech, like welding and pipe fitters.
And that's definitely where the benefit goes, because that's where the benefit goes.
Sure.
Is that a 2-year program in college isn't worth a pot to piss in. I mean, an associate's degree, if you're getting an LPN or something like that makes sense.
But this is getting a lot of people into college who would not be there at all.
And you're still luring them into spending money for federal loans and things like this that they don't need, that they could have done in a vocational school that required 2 years. Maybe. I mean, that's the fact of the matter.
Not everyone goes to vocational school.
Oh, no, I know they don't, and that's my point. What I'm saying is you dump 2 years into a community college for free. If you dump 2 years into a community college for free, but you need 2 more years to finish your bachelor's,
you're already halfway there.
You're already halfway there. Great. And now let's see you dump the money into some loans now. And let's see you lose your ground and still end up working at a fucking Red Lobster, or whatever. I mean, but that's a real point. It's a real point.
Yeah.
So, how many people do you know in grad school that wait tables still that couldn't get a job with their undergrad degree? So like, well, I majored in English or whatever, so I'm going to get an English degree.
That's what I would be doing with a law degree if I got it now.
Well, that's up to you.
It's just the price.
As a man who graduated last in my class in the law degree, I've run a successful law practice and worked for a nonprofit. You can do that on your own. All you got to do is pass the bar. I still ate a lot of loans to do that. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is, you are, in essence, the idea is to try to get people away from spending money in loans and being in debt to educate themselves better. But if you do that for an associate's degree and not a 4-year degree, what good have you done? Because the 4-year degree is barely, because you're halfway there. Right, cool. Yeah, you got 2 years for free, and now.
But how many people end up going to college for a couple years and dropping out because they don't get a chance to finish?
80% of them do. Right, and so
if you get people,
you think you gave them a heads up by giving them 2 years for free, and they still got to go in debt, and you think they're going to finish the other 2 years?
Listen,
I think a lot of people will.
I'm not going to sit here and argue against education and say that we don't need a more educated workforce.
I'll agree with you entirely on that. Right. It doesn't matter where the education goes. If it's vocational, but I think that we start stronger by worrying about K through 12. I mean, I think
that's a valid point. I really do.
I know a lot of dumbasses that have grad and PhD degrees.
Well, sure.
That are absolute idiots and they're impossible to talk to.
Right.
And you can't even talk to them because their political opinions and how they stand about things are intolerable. And they think that you're this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And
but let's move on, shall we? What else did we want to hit on, James? Did you have?
The last thing that I really wanted to talk about, and I mean, and I wanted to leave you room to kind of bring your own topics up, so I feel like I kind of controlled this entire thing with questions. But I want to talk about civil liberties because he's
here to convince you and people on your side of the aisle.
Yeah, well,
I'm kind of already back. You were talking about vouchers. I'm like, well, I'm preaching to the choir.
Okay, and. I don't think we're going to agree on that one. But, okay, civil liberties.
Civil liberties.
You call yourself on your page a strict constitutional.
And civil libertarian. Yeah.
Can you explain what that means?
Wait, I want to ask, but I'm going to, because I want to ask absolute primary because it follows into the quote from the strict constitutionalists. You say, you believe people have a right to live their lives how they see fit, regardless of their identity. And that's a direct quote.
Yes.
Where does that actually come into play for conservatives like me, especially, and I'm not a Christian conservative, but I have a lot of friends and family and people that are really close to me. Say you're a Christian conservative. Does that apply to you if you say, look, I'm not into this gay marriage thing, or I don't believe in gay rights, or like I don't want transgenders using this bathroom or that bathroom in my establishment? You know, my question is how does that apply? And do you believe the message across the board, or do you think it needs... You know, because we're talking about something, in my opinion, false to the Constitution. And it falls to the judiciary to interpret the Constitution. And I think Congress and state legislators have no place in it. Stay the hell out. Don't say, oh, gays can't use that bathroom or transgenders can't use that bathroom. That's not your business. That's the business of the judiciary. But
can't we just accommodate people? Right. Do we really need the federal government to tell us which bathrooms? I mean, as a herd.
But apparently we do. You know,
well, you're talking about such a tiny fraction of people out there. And, you know, this is one of the things with the transgender. People don't realize. And there was a documentary on HBO recently, and I don't mean to get off on this.
Well, that's okay. I love HBO, and I watch that documentary.
But there was a documentary recently, and about 50% of the people, and a lot of children, they have identity problem. Well, I say a lot, a very small fraction.
Well, I feel you.
And you typically have about a 50% suicide rate by the time the folks reach 25.
And
so this topic of and I can tell you, Shelley and I were recently traveling down the interstate, and the men's bathroom is occupied, and the ladies' bathroom is wide open, and so I went and used the ladies' bathroom.
I've done it before. I do this every day. I'm at my girlfriend's bar. I do the same thing. They're single person bathrooms.
I do that at your girlfriend's bar.
Yeah, they're single person bathrooms, and that men's room is always occupied because there's a lot more men there.
Look, a crime is
I lift the seat. I wash my hands. I put the seat back down. You know, like I do my thing in the women's bathroom.
And so what it is, it's a scare tactic that I can't send my daughter to the bathroom because she's going to, something's going to happen bad. A crime is a crime no matter where it occurs. In the bathroom, in the parking lot, wherever.
Okay, so
I don't think that anything that we have said or done is going to change someone's motivation to commit a crime and to say, now this law is passed. Right, of course. And
so
that was the demagogue.
My question is, as the guy who used the women's bathroom at a restaurant, and let's say you did it in North Carolina.
Well,
clearly that's against the law, and it's a felony.
Right, that's crazy.
And so I'm asking, do you believe that's an issue for state or federal law to address?
Once again, can't we just accommodate people? If people need to be accommodated, we as a herd, think about it, what mankind has been through and how we have, civilized after 10,000 years here. But think about what it was like 8,000 years ago. I mean, we've been going to the bathroom for a long time. And I just can't
where we can, when we can.
That's right. And I just can't believe, it's a funny, it's funny you bring that up, a funny story about Europeans on that. But Europeans.
Yeah, it's very different over there.
They'll go anywhere.
They don't.
They just don't really care. They just
time in Europe. I know
bathroom, no bathroom, doesn't really matter.
Can't really say that I enjoyed Europe. I was really happy to be back in America because
absolutely. Well, and a lot of country folks in Tennessee. I mean,
Oh man, you stick them in Paris, and they're going to be happy to come back to Tennessee.
Yeah, right. So
I want to see the world. Well, no, I really don't.
So I think that this is one of those division issues, that is used by politicians to drive a division and a wedge between us. Hell, this may be something that the Russians are promoting. Just to drive a wedge between us. We're talking about such a fraction.
It's my understanding. It's 0.4% of the U.S. population. To say nothing of what the actual population in Tennessee is. You're probably talking about a couple hundred people.
I round up these.
And we've been arguing, but not you and me, but we in general, people engaged in politics, has been arguing about this for over a year. It's absurd.
The question becomes one of on how you legislate and how your country runs. I mean, you said 0.4% of Tennessee. I'm going to go ahead and give the benefit of the doubt and say 1%.
Okay.
Sure.
Why in the hell are we concerned about 1% of Tennessee's population?
Because we don't take a head count before we enforce the Constitution.
High five. There you go. That was the right answer. that was the right answer. That's the right answer, and that's what matters. And it's really not about how much of a minority you are.
Right.
It's more about protecting equal rights.
Sure.
And so that leads me to all kinds of questions. We can do this all day long.
Sure.
And I mean, if you want to do the football thing, we can talk about how do you feel about racial injustice in the criminal justice system. We
Sure.
can talk about the Second Amendment. We can talk about all kinds of stuff. So
Absolutely.
let's start with fun questions for my conservative constituents in this state.
Okay.
What are your positions on the Second Amendment?
Very much pro Second Amendment. My wife and I both carry firearms. I was at a bird hunt, 2 bird hunts, quail and dove, over the past month when bird season opened up. And so I would never promote taking away a family's ability to defend themselves.
Even on a carry permit realm.
Even on a carry permit round, listen though, once again, this is where education is important.
I
We have
agree.
a lot of accidents that happen.
Yes,
And it's because of lack of education.
and many homicides come from accidental firearm discharges.
Absolutely. And so, that's where education really comes in. Now, should a parent be held responsible if their child gets a hold of the loaded gun and kills themselves? Of course they should be.
Yes.
It's called being an adult.
Well,
right?
should the firearm manufacturer be held under deep pockets?
Yeah, probably not.
I agree with that too.
Because that's difficult. Now, if there was something defective, there have been some glocks.
Sure. Yeah, it's a product liability issue.
Right, there's a product liability issue.
But is the product naturally liable because it's a death machine?
I don't think so. No, I'm not going to go there, and
I wouldn't think so either.
I'll take some heat
As
from
long
that.
as they
I guess I'm
not as liberal.
This was a Hillary. That was a Hillary issue. Is that Hillary Clinton was very strongly in favor of holding them liable for products liability no matter what, just simply because the thing is dangerous.
Right. Did I mention I got 18,000 more votes than Hillary? Right?
That's a huge accomplishment. I think if you could have tripled that and pushed it to her, Donald Trump wouldn't even be president.
Yeah, right.
But that's a whole other thing.
Sure.
Okay, so the Second Amendment, cool. Fourth Amendment, and these are things I'm going to talk about a lot.
Sure.
And this is something that's near and dear to me. Obviously, as a criminal defense attorney,
Right.
We have the Sixth District, the federal district of our Court of Appeals, has ruled that essentially police can take your thumb and hold it to your cell phone, and while you're under arrest, and go ahead and get access to it, and you have no right to what's in your cell phone as protected.
No.
Where are we with that?
Yeah. No drawing of the blood.
Yeah.
No forced urine test.
Okay, but and I'm going to try to be quick about this because I'm going to try and touch on them.
Is this the lightning round?
Birchfield is a decision that came out last year from the Supreme Court of the United States on the drawing of the blood, and said there are no exigent circumstances to draw blood, which means that you need a warrant no matter what.
Right.
However, Justice Alito, in the same breath, turned around and said, you must give breathalyzers as a search incident to arrest. You have no constitutional right to disagree with that. You must breathe into the tube and give them that.
Right, which seems polar opposite of each other, right? The same as your breath, as your blood, the air in your lungs.
In my argument, I would say that forcefully breathing into a tube, because if you've never breathed into one before, as a prosecutor, I've done this.
I'm not a drinker,
But yes, if you've ever you breathe into a tube,
right?
Is that not the same thing as testifying against yourself? I mean, are you not giving evidence against yourself?
I think that's a great
Is it not the same as speaking against yourself? I mean, really all we're doing is moving vocal cords differently, but it's still an exhalation of air.
Very valid point. Absolutely. And once again, the same thing with the gun issue, right? The responsibility that comes with the consumption of alcohol. Mm-hmm. The 4th Congressional District is the home of Jack Daniels.
It is indeed.
Famous whiskeys in the world, right? And by the way, the median income in Lynchburg and Moore counties is twice that of the 4th Congressional District.
I mean, it's because Jack Daniels pays very well to their employees and people around them, and they support the community very well because, hell, they're the most popular whiskey in the world.
Right. So absolutely.
I mean, if you've ever been to Japan or Germany or France or anyone else, and you tell these people, I'm from Tennessee, the first thing they say is Jack Daniels.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes Elvis.
Sometimes Elvis. Yeah, but it's usually Jack Daniels. I'm like, yes, Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
That's right.
But yeah. So right. So you're getting you're really slicing hairs on the law. Now we don't want people driving drunk. Of course
not.
Or inebriated under anything. Whether it be marijuana. By the way, I stand for decriminalization of marijuana on a federal level. I think that we should allow the states to decide, like they're deciding right now, But I would definitely put a 20% federal excise tax on recreational.
That's how you get your tax money. Don't tax income, tax it on the sale.
Right. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to earmark that money specifically, though, for drug rehabilitation programs, for mental health care programs, and back to your college affordability. If there's anything left over for that,
you're talking my language.
Maybe we can use that for
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a lot in where I was going to go next on criminal rehabilitation is the question of how do you feel about, I guess, punitive versus rehabilitation in the criminal justice system for sentencing.
Yeah, so I favor the drug courts very much, and what's going on now with the drug courts where they're trying
some drug courts. You are in the 4th district, and maybe 3 out of your 14 counties have a drug court.
Right.
Murray County does not. We explicitly reject it, and we imprison pot smokers who have civil possession.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Entirely. A waste of money, a waste of time.
Right. The statistics show that it's institutionally racist, that about 3 to 4 times as many black kids go to jail.
Damn
because
right.
They can't afford an attorney. We are underfunded. Oh, that's another thing I want to use my tax on.
I do want to point out one thing.
Sure.
Every time I talk about this statistic, and like you just brought it up, it is not about not being able to afford an attorney, because I don't want to down on the public defender's office.
Right. But they're
underfunded and they're overworked.
Yes.
They are great attorneys. Every public defender I've ever known in my life, no matter the jurisdiction, they've been fantastic attorneys.
That's not they're overworked. They have too much on the docket, right, that they're trying to do. And so back to my tax on decriminalization of my federal tax, I said drug rehabilitation, I said mental health care, public defenders' offices. I would like to shore them up with some of the funding from that as well.
And they deserve it, and they need it.
Yeah, but we have a lot of folks out there that are serving it costs a lot more to imprison people.
Absolutely.
Hell yes, it does.
And you ask young kids today, you ask a teenager today, what's easier to obtain, alcohol or marijuana? What do you think the answer is?
Marijuana, hands down.
All day.
Because
it's a black market item.
I mean, I was in college. I couldn't buy alcohol until I was 21. But I could buy marijuana like it was easy.
Yeah, they used to call me Beer on Dave in college. And it's not for no reason.
I mean, no. Because I was hanging around here. I mean, I would easily exploit people who own liquor stores and things like that. I didn't have a fake ID. They all knew who I was. I would show them ID, and they would even look at the damn age, and I would just buy alcohol. Sure. But I was an exception to the rule. You know, these people knew me, and I was very nice to them, and I would pay them well and everything else. But getting marijuana, I mean, all you got to do is walk down the street, ask somebody, hey, where can I get some pot? Got you. Because it's a black market system. And if you don't regulate it, you can't control it.
Right. So here you are, Mr. Libertarian, arguing for some government control.
Of course. And that's fine. And that's fine. And I'll be the first to say it. That's fine. Yeah. There are regulations that do belong.
I agree. And that's right. And so meeting in the middle is what you and I have to do.
And I think there's regulations across the board that many libertarians wouldn't agree with.
Right.
But you have to regulate some things to have order and law.
Of course you do, and of course you do.
And less is better, but you know.
So let's go back to this weed issue, to the marijuana issue, the cannabis issue. Who's against this? Who's fighting this?
I will tell you, many conservatives are, and I know rational people who still have a very irrational outlook at it. They see the supposed gateway drug argument.
Yeah.
A personal friend of mine who I'm very close with.
Right.
He's a great friend of mine. He's absolutely anti-marijuana legalization because his brother died of a heroin overdose.
Yeah. Well.
But I don't see the things related. But he has a block to. But he has a very strong block to it.
That's the whole reefer madness thing. So I've never taken a shot of Jack Daniels and said, that just didn't do it for me. I think I'll try some heroin.
I mean, I agree with you, and it's the same way about marijuana.
Right. And so
I was in college. I smoked marijuana. Never once did I say, "Man, I really want to shoot up some heroin."
Right, of course, right. And so let's put the blame on the heroin rise where it belongs, which is with the pharmaceuticals and the opiate problem.
Yeah, I was going to say the opioid crisis. That's the real problem.
That's the fourth time I've done this today, and I'm with you.
Over in Marshall County, Tennessee, and Lewisburg, right now, for every citizen that lives there are 17 opiate prescriptions.
Damn right. And same thing in Lawrenceburg, same thing in Murray County.
Yes.
We have pain clinics that are unregulated, that are just destroying our communities.
And our families. And Shelley's here with me today, and Shelley will tell you that our family has experienced this personally.
My family has too.
And a loss. And a lot of people have. And we just recently started talking about this. Yeah. But I can promise you, And in a lot of cases, marijuana helps the addicted recover. There's been a lot of cases where they're showing that now, where opiate prescriptions have gone down.
And Colorado is a huge bastion.
If you've ever seen anyone with cancer suffering from cancer, how you could possibly deny someone, I mean, the humanity behind that. So let's talk about your friend, though, and why he's against it.
And his main issue
is a gateway.
He's also former law enforcement, and he's an older guy.
So how are law enforcement incentivized? How is their budget incentivized today? Civil asset forfriture.
You're goddamn right.
Yeah. So
pardon my French.
I know I've won a libertarian over there.
I don't know if you've won me. I don't know if you've won me, Steve.
I told you we had.
I'll tell you what. Yeah. I will agree with that. Civil asset forfeiture is absolutely a travesty.
It is.
And Tennessee is one of the worst proponents.
But that's because we fund our
Dixon
police
County
departments
alone. Yes, and it's a joke. But not only our police departments, but entire campaigns for sheriffs have been run on civil asset forfeiture, which is illegal as hell.
Of course it is.
And we still do it, and it's still, hey, bud, where are you on your way to? Well, I'm going to go buy a car. Do you have any cash on you? Yeah, I got $5,000 in cash.
Yeah.
I'm about to go buy a car. Well, that's been stolen now because we believe that that's drug money and you're going to go buy drugs.
Right.
It could be, but it's a preponderance of the evidence, and it's a whole other case that's not even close to fair.
Yeah. Can I tell you a story about my friend? Right. Can I tell you a story about a friend of mine? He lives here in Tennessee, and he got into the marijuana, cannabis cultivating business out in Colorado in 2005. And because of the federal law.
2005 was before it was legalized.
Yeah, well, it was right. Well, okay, so he started right at the beginning. That's when they started.
That was 08. That was actually no, that was 2012 that it was actually legalized. But okay. So your buddy was illegally growing marijuana.
Well, we're talking about medical cannabis.
Okay.
The only thing his company does is they manufacture seven different strands for pediatric cancer. For children with cancer.
The kinds that are zero THC but high in cannabinoids that are beneficial.
That's all they do, okay? They don't sell legal marijuana. They just sell for children.
They basically create oils that can be used that don't get people high, but are high in CBDs that help people.
That's correct, yes. And so my friend has to go to Colorado once a month to collect his money. Because he can't use the bank. Because of the
course. Oh, yeah, and you can't. God forbid you put that money in a Tennessee bank because that's going to get seized.
If he comes back, right? So
this man is, I assume, is burying safes in his yard that are
in Colorado. But when he flies to Colorado, he buys a car. He picks up his money. He drives back to Tennessee. He sells the car.
Oh man!
Right? Okay. So
he's already broken the law. You use drug profits
by carrying the money.
Not even by carrying the money, by using the profits to buy something in interstate commerce.
Okay, I'm not saying his name then, but how ridiculous is that?
That is absolutely ridiculous. Oh my God, you're gonna make my head explode. Yeah. I could go on this all day long.
Right.
It is a joke.
It's a joke.
And this is a flaw of the federal government in general. And I will talk about this is why the FBI should be dissolved. This is why the DEA should be. I mean, there are no such thing as federal crimes until we create them.
That's a great point.
And they shouldn't exist in the first place.
Treason.
The DEA and ATF, that's a federal crime that already existed, and that's fine. But you don't need an FBI for that.
Right.
Do you?
Right.
Cannot a state government prove treason?
Great point.
But that's the issue is that when you use the interstate commerce clause to say, well, we made legalized marijuana or whatever, we made that illegal, and now you're moving between states, and that's our interstate commerce clause catch.
That's right.
Or it's the same thing we do with firearms. And now Tennessee is fighting back against that with firearms. Is now you can now manufacture suppressors and fully auto firearms in Tennessee if they don't enter interstate commerce.
Sure.
And they're stamped in Tennessee, and you own them in Tennessee.
Manufacture full auto.
Oh yes, and we're doing that.
That's not.
And the Attorney General's office is doing that to fight back against the ATF, and they should. Mm-hmm. I understand we don't really need full auto weapons, but it's a symbolic thing, especially with suppressors.
Right.
If it's stamped and manufactured in Tennessee, and you own it in Tennessee, when have you triggered the interstate commerce clause? Right. You have not. It's never left the state of Tennessee. What business is it of the federal government?
That's a good point.
And so when the federal government wants to get involved, now you have a constitutional argument the Attorney General of the state of Tennessee has to take up for you. They have to fight it for you.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I have several friends that I will not discuss at all because clearly they have several implications with
Sure.
ATF. If they got caught doing it, the ATF wanted to push them, they'd be looking at 10 years minimum federal prison time taken away from their families for making a suppressor.
Sure.
That they manufactured in Tennessee, they stamped by state law and did what was required by state law, and it never left their possession.
Unbelievable.
They manufactured it themselves.
Sure.
So this becomes an issue of the 10th Amendment, which is where I want to go.
Okay.
The last thing I want to talk about.
Okay, cool.
How do you feel about the 10th Amendment? Do you believe that if it is not expressed either implicitly or explicitly in the Constitution, that it belongs to the states to decide?
In a lot of cases, yes, I do. There are exceptions to that. Once again, back to when we talked about infrastructure. If we don't fund the bridge in Montana, we can't get the goods imported in California here.
Sure,
right?
sure.
But fundamentally, yes. Obviously, school boards are going to work better in the local communities that they exist in instead of from someone in D.C.
Would you be okay with abolishing the Department of Education?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one, for a long time.
I mean, you just said states do better. But
right. Well, that is true. That is true. And really, on the federal level, really what happens is the the Department of Education pretty much just funds what's going on in the state level.
Should they be funding it or should they be arbitering it? Should they be the arbiter of it?
So think about this. Would we have equality for all of our students, their special needs students, if we didn't have the federal government? Let's say...
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think you got me there.
Yeah. Would the people of Alabama...
There's really no way I'm going to defend that because, yes, the people of Alabama... And I'm going to go ahead and cite in Alabama right now. Y'all suck as a state. Roy Moore is who you're going for. Y'all are real shit people and you need to get your shit together in general. But... yeah, I think you would have let disadvantaged special ed kids just rot and no one would give a shit.
Right. And maybe even, people of color. And so.
Oh, well, we know that already. That's clear. I mean, there's a reason Selma was.
Listen, there are good people in Alabama.
Well,
don't get me wrong.
I
don't mean to condemn
I just
an
like to
entire
talk
state.
shit about Alabama.
Yeah, I do too, right? Of course,
Tennessean thing, but but no, I feel you, and I think that's what I was asking more.
Sure.
Should the Department of Education fund these things and take federal government money to fund programs, or should they be the arbitrator of those programs and say, hey, we have our own little, essentially a court system that says you're abusing rights, that's not going to fly, here's your fine, here's your punishment, fix it.
Well, once again,
or should it be, we're just going to funnel money into it and we're going to let you do your own thing like we do now, which doesn't work out, and you still see abuses.
We have
Title IX, which still tries to protect people, but that still doesn't work out, as we know, and you see challenges to it anyway. Shouldn't we use Title IX to be an arbitration system to say you're not following the rules that we believe are fundamental and belong to the federal government under Title IX? Shouldn't we use that money to be a court challenge system rather than let's just dump money into these programs that don't get funded the way we need them to be funded anyway?
Sure.
Shouldn't we say you're not spending the money you should be spending in the right way, rather than just saying, here's all this money, and you guys div it up, and but when we see an abuse, we're going to call you out for it, and the DOJ is going to prosecute you.
Right. And that's really what we have.
And that's what we do is we just give them all this money and they still sweep special education and they still just treat people like shit that are minorities.
We have more and more students that are like that. And we've got to address that. We have, I want to say the number, for autistic students.
It's like 1 in 88 now or something.
Yeah, it's going to be like 1 in 10 years from now, right? And so we've got to prepare. We've got a snowball coming.
Oh, yeah. But I think a lot of that has to do with we've always had that issue.
Yeah.
It's just that our understanding of medicine has gotten better, and our idea of what is the autistic spectrum has grown, and we understand.
Yes.
And we realize that this problem is much larger than we knew before.
And that's just one example, but yes, that's exactly right. And so kind of back to what I said about the roads. Whoever carries the governor gets the projects. Is that going to be the same way with the schools too?
Sure.
So I think the federal government plays as a great arbitrator of making sure that there's balance within the states that are there.
And my question there for you is, if you were a congressman, if you were elected,
Sure.
Would you focus the Department of Education to be more of the arbitration end rather than the just fund it and forget it end? Because what we do is fund it and forget it. We just cut budgets and we don't do shit for people. And then occasionally we'll put out a policy depending on who the president is. We'll, like Obama.
No child left behind.
Yeah, exactly. They'll tailor Title IX and they'll adjust it and say, well, these are what we're going to implement.
Right.
And I don't think that's the right way to do it. My opinion is you shouldn't be funding these things necessarily. What you need to be doing is the funding should be for the protection of these people when a challenge is brought. There needs to be a better system to protect them on a federal level because you're not using your funding that you're getting better.
Sure.
The way we do it is we fund it and we forget it.
Right.
We raise the Department of Education. We get, $300 or $400 million a year or whatever the situation is.
Right.
And we just split it out between the states and we're like, okay, have at you, do your thing.
And we're talking on a very high level here. Because
it's federal government.
That's right.
That's where you're running, and you're going to have to understand that.
No, that's exactly right.
That's the realm you're going to play in.
That's right. And so the impact of a congressman on that is going to be limited. I think you and I can both agree.
Exactly.
That pretty much a congressman,
you're right.
Is going to be is going to be funding the Department of Education.
Yes.
But let me say this while I can. This is a little bit of a campaign plug.
Please do.
My education advisor is the former TEA president for 4 years. She was the first lady to ever visit all 95 counties in the state of Tennessee. I think that's extremely important. She was also the president of the Retired Teachers Association. In addition to that, I have 4 other educators on my staff. We have 22 people on our staff. We've got veterans, we have international businessmen, we have attorneys, we have former educators.
Awesome.
And my staff is 100% volunteer. So we're not paying a D.C. company or Chicago or New York to come tell us what the issues are in Tennessee. And so the campaign donations, remember I told you that we're very limited as to who we solicit funds from. But we're not paying a staff for that. We're paying actual Tennesseans who live here, who understand the issues here, who understand the culture here.
Yes.
And I think that's an extremely important differential between me and the rest of the candidates that are out there is that we don't of course now we struggle like any grassroots campaign. And everyone calls themselves a grassroots campaign today.
Oh shit.
Greg Sterrett spent $2 million last time and he said, I'm a grassroots guy, it's about because he wrote a check for $2 million, But that's not the truth, okay?
No, I understand.
Grassroots are people that are just want to be involved because they believe in a movement and an idea that we need to return back to the basic fundamentals of our governments, roads, schools, healthcare, those types of things, get away from these divisive issues, these wedge issues.
But you're going to have to stand up for those issues occasionally.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
I mean, if you're going to promote civil liberty and you're going to say you're a constitutionalist, you are going to have to tell your constituents when they say, you know what, fuck gay marriage. These people are abominations. You're going to have to stand up and say, look, I agree with your ability to have an opinion, but I think you're wrong. And I'm not going to represent that.
And see, that's the difference between me. I don't just speak to like-minded people. I go to the conservative people of Tennessee.
Yes,
I go to where they are. I can't expect them to come to me. I have to go to them.
Yes.
That's one of the biggest problems that's with politics right now. Why have the Democrats been decimated, David, in Tennessee? Because we've stopped going to the people.
No, we have.
We write them off, absolutely.
Exactly, and not only that, but we tell them what they need to think.
I'll tell you a story.
That was one of my first, before you started, one of the first thoughts I had when I saw that you were running. I was like, how is this guy, how is he... That's a lot. Those areas, those are lost causes. Like that's it. But I definitely agree that you're doing what needs to be done to get it going. So.
Right. So let me tell you a story about that. My son, I mentioned my son that's a sophomore at the University of Tennessee, and I won't tell you the county, but on the 4th of July we went to a parade in a county last year.
Okay.
And when we got there were more Confederate flags flying than there were American flags.
Ooh.
Now, my 18-year-old son, 19, I think he was 19 at the time, he looks at me before we get out of the car, and he says, Dad, are we really going to do this?
Damn right.
That's what I said. You're damn right we are.
Yep.
And you know what? We handed out 500 cards that day. And I won't tell you, once again, I'm not going to tell you where these people are located. Yeah. But they were so respectful and hospitable, and we only ran into a couple of folks that were, But most people said, Steve, we hadn't seen a Democrat here in 15 years. Thank you for coming to say hello to us. Thank you for coming out and trying to spread the word about your campaign. And so I think I won some votes by doing that.
I would say you did. And not only that, but I would have to agree with you on that end too, is that, I mean, you got to get that message out there.
You have to.
You do. And you need to get the message out. And this is just having worked on campaigns myself, and I will tell you this.
Sure.
The deck is stacked against you.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
You have got to get that voice out there and
sure.
say, look, I'm willing to listen to what you got to say.
Sure.
But I'm going to cut you off on certain things.
Sure.
You know, like this Confederate shit.
Right.
Feel free. Fly it. Do your thing. I mean, this is America. Fly whatever flag you want. You fly in a Nazi flag, you're welcome to.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's not going to resonate with me.
Yeah.
It doesn't resonate with me. I find it disgusting.
Right.
But at the same time, it's your right to do so.
It's your right to do so. So let me tell you a story about the little town I grew up in Manchester, Tennessee. When I was a child in the 70s, I can remember the Klan standing at the red light collecting money once a year.
Oh, hell yeah. No, yep, Tennessee's full of the Klan.
I can remember.
I was a prosecutor in Pulaski, I know.
I can remember, and we'll talk about the people of Pulaski in a second. I can remember them burning a cross. When I was a child, I was scared to death
that's the
that
point.
these people were in my town.
That's the point.
And let me tell you about this little town now, though. It's the home of Bonnaroo now. That's what it's
I know Manchester. I'm very familiar with Manchester.
So now we have an African-American mayor. 2% population, 2% minority population. But Mayor Norman is the mayor of Manchester. And I couldn't be prouder of the people of Coffee County in Manchester, Tennessee. Because we've come so far in the last 30 years. And it didn't matter. Those people have gone away. We don't see them anymore. Even in Giles County, I have good friends in Pulaski and Giles County.
Oh, yes, I do too. I love Giles County.
And you know what? The Klan used to go down there and they would have their event. And so the business owners said,
and you know what? No one gave a damn. It was go ahead and march, and we don't want anything to do with you.
Now they close Now they close their businesses down, and so basically
they don't care. Just get out of our town.
Just do your
pass through and get
right. Yeah. And so we have come a long way, and we're not going to go backwards in Tennessee.
I agree.
And so I know our generation.
I'll tell you what, I may be conservative on that end, and I will be conservative across the board, but I'll tell you right now, we're not going that way with racial injustice in Tennessee. We're not. And I'll put my foot down for it, too. We're not doing it. That's just not how it's going to be. That's not how we do. This is Tennessee. We are a very inclusive state, and that's the way it's going to be forever and always.
People are people.
I hope so.
That's the way, and the only way that's going to be is if you put your foot down and say, it ain't I hope so. It's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
Either get used to it or get out.
We've seen progress. We've seen a ton of progress since I've been alive in this. And I wasn't raised this way. You know, I wasn't raised to be racial, where it's us versus them. That just wasn't the family that I grew up in, and most of the families that I know.
I've never met a family in the state of Tennessee. I've met people who have racist, relatives, racist parents, things like this.
Sure.
But they're still able to engage in conversation and recognize when they're wrong. And you've got to be respectful to them and tell them why they're wrong. Right. And they respond to that. And they really do. Is if you do a good job of actually engaging them in it and saying, man, I know you grew up in it, but this just is not the way it is. And let me show you this example.
Sure.
The conversation never gets tired. And I know if you're going to champion it, and you're going to deal with it day in and day out, and you're going to deal with racial opposition and people who are telling you just racist crap over and over again, you can't let your guard down.
Right.
You just have to keep pushing forward, and you have to engage them. Yeah. And the more you're just like, well, go screw yourself or whatever. Yeah. That's not helping anything.
No, it's not.
You have to engage them and show them why it's not okay.
So that this is where part of the problems that I feel like that the Democrat Party and the liberals have reaching out to, especially the rural. What you have is urban and rural. It doesn't matter which party. You have urban versus rural. The people out in the country feel left behind.
They do.
And so they sure do, and especially by what they view, especially some Democrats, they'll say, oh, these elitist, Ivy-educated people.
Well, I'm going to tell you, you got a big push for electoral college and things like this being gotten rid of. And really what it comes down to is metropolitan cities will decide our entire election, and 41 states get no say.
Right, and I don't support that at all. I support keeping the electoral college in place.
But that's a huge argument for people who push back against this ultra liberal, this progressive liberal push.
Sure.
That's really their main issue is, look, I don't want to be racist or anything, but I don't have a voice anymore. You know, like, okay, cool. LA, New York, Florida, Miami, you know, like Houston, Dallas.
Sure.
These people are going to tell me how to run the country. I don't get a say.
Right. No, I totally.
And that's the fear, is that they're worried about whatever progressive liberal agenda has swept these major cities, because the progressive liberal agenda does sweep major cities. And that's their concern, is like, no one gives a damn about what I say.
Right. Well, a lot of that is messaging. A lot of that is programming. You know, you and I, once again, are reaching through that computer and grabbing that mind, you know, and manipulating that mind. And so I think most people that I run into, it doesn't matter how they identify politically, they just want common sense. They want pragmatism. They want the most cost-efficient way to take. When people need to see a doctor, every moral, decent, good person I know wants our people to be taken care of.
Yes.
They need a doctor.
That's right.
The argument is what is the most effective way to do that? Now, people will say, well, Steve, you're a socialist then. You know, if you think that everyone has a right to see a doctor when they're sick. Listen, if someone starts choking on the cupcake, what are you going to do? Are you going to help?
You're going to tell them about personal responsibility, right, James?
I feel like we got a long.
Yeah, I know, and we've had a long
road even on that. First of all,
I'm not going there, dude. I'm
going to be real quick and just jump in and jump out.
Yeah.
Everyone should have right to access to health care.
Right, and there's that magic word, access.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you go into a hospital or someone takes you to a hospital, they should treat you. How you pay for it is your own problem.
Ronald Reagan, you know, and it's funny that you say that. The mandate is like really a big issue, right? Because people say the government shouldn't.
It's a huge issue for me because I can't afford it based on my income.
Right.
I cannot afford health care, so I don't have it, so I pay tax penalties.
Right. And so
sucks.
Right.
Thank you good job, James. You made it to the middle class by 25, and you're screwed.
Right. And I
eat $10,000 a year in taxes because I can't pay for it.
And so that's one of the big issues, though, right?
Yeah, huge issue.
The mandate. So let me ask you this: is this a compromise for you?
No.
Let me offer my compromise. If I offered you a waiver that said that you would waive yourself, that unless you had the cash, if you became injured or sick, that unless you had the cash to pay for that, that we would surrender our right as a society to treat you. In other words, you're going to folks that can't afford coverage.
You want me to prepay? Like, I'm in a car accident, I'm dying in a coma.
There you go.
And I got to prepay?
Of course.
How am I going to agree to that with consent?
Right, but because
so that's not a compromise.
And so
nice try. But
and so it's not, but it's not affordable, right? It's not affordable, and for these people,
it's going to be the same problem for me either way. So I don't see what your compromise is.
Right. So people are just stuck on the mandate. And my compromise is okay, I'll take the mandate away. And you'll say that if you have a catastrophic health issue, I'm not going to have to pay for it.
Yeah, the difference is it was affordable for me to have catastrophic coverage before. And then you put the mandate in there, and now it's not. And it's the same damn thing. It's the same thing. I'm paying for the same thing, but 3 times as much.
Sure.
I used to pay $50 a month for $8,000 deductible on catastrophic coverage. That was great. If I want that, it's $150, but I don't qualify for it because I make too much already, so I can't even get in that bracket.
Right.
So I have to pay somewhere around the neighborhood of $400 to $700 a month to not have prescription coverage or anything else.
Right.
And I get $2,000 deductible, which I can't afford either.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, I'm with you. It's an insurance. So there are things that need to be done to amend the ACA to make it better.
And I feel like we don't really have time for that.
We don't. We've been going at it for a while.
Yeah, we have. And I really.
Is there anything you would given that, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Sure. Well, thanks for that, David. Well, first off, guys, I really appreciate the opportunity.
We love having you here, man. I really do appreciate
Thank you so much.
I've learned a lot about your stances, and I appreciate hearing that because I think we can educate people in the 4th District.
Right. I hope so. And that's the biggest thing for us is getting the word out about who we are as a candidate. And so a lot of times people hear Democrat or Republican, and they automatically make assumptions. Right, and so we want to get past all of that, and we want to make the best decisions for the people of the state of Tennessee. We want to do what's right for the people here, and we want to do it in a way that people approve of, which is not by taking money from special interest, taking money from the big giant donors, letting them control us. We truly want to serve the people. Steven Reynolds for U.S. Congress is more than just me. It's about the people of Tennessee and the people of our country and who we really represent here. I think it's important, once again, about who I will accept money, take money from, and who I won't take money from. And I think it's important that I'm not a professional politician. I still have a job. And so we have a family. And so we're doing this to give people a choice. And I feel like that's my patriotic duty here in the 4th Congressional District of Tennessee. We ran a great campaign last time, received more votes than any challenger in the state, 18,000 more than Hillary. We laid the infrastructure and the foundation to run a successful campaign this time. And I would be honored to be your congressional representatives, to have both of you guys come to my congressional office. We'll do a podcast from there. You can ask me any question in the world, and I'll do my best to answer them to the best of my ability of what's going on.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I'll be ready for that.
So I want to ask all of your followers, please go to Facebook, like my page, Steven Reynolds for U.S. Congress. That's Steven with a V for victory. At Reynolds 4 Rep, the number 4, Reynolds 4 Rep, because we're the 4th Congressional District. That's my Twitter account. And you can follow my website at Reynolds, the number 4, Congress TN, which you'll see also my staff that's working for me, that's 100% volunteer. I'm so proud of the diversity of the people, that we don't go out and give platitudes to people or go out and prompt people to join our campaign. They come to us, and that makes me very, very proud, especially the diversity of the campaign staff that we have. We have, blue dog, right-leaning Democrats. We have extreme liberal people that are on our staff.
I've seen that. If you guys get a chance to check out his website, he's got the whole staff list there, and it's very diverse. I was intrigued.
It is. We did look at that. That was a huge thing. When I found out you were going to be on our show, David had lined that up, and
sure.
That was the first thing I did. I was like, well, let me parse through everything I can. I want to talk to you about the real important issues.
Absolutely.
Specifically from the position of conservatives,
sure,
like myself,
sure,
in the 4th District.
Sure.
We have questions for you.
I had almost 26% of my voters were non-Hillary voters last time, and I think that's very, very important. Especially this time, our message is, if you voted for Steven Reynolds in 2016, if you'll do it one more time, well, 2 more times, and then you win the primary, but if you'll do it one more time in the general election, that's enough to beat Scott DesJarlais' midterm average by about 15,000 votes. So really the message, and we know we're attracting new voters too, but really the message is this time, get out and vote. I've been guilty myself. I became apathetic. For a long time of my life, I said I don't like either side. I can't vote for either side. And people said, you've got to get involved, Steve. You've got to do something. You've got to try. And so some people may hold that against me, my apathy early on in my life and my career.
Sure, right.
But I've gotten involved. And I can promise you, this is costing me and my wife money. We're not making money off of this. This actually cost our time and our treasure. But it's how I'm trying to give back. I'm not a veteran. We were basically in peace, which I know that's hard to believe since we've been at war for 17 years now.
I understand. I fully understand. I come from a family of veterans, and I'm not one. I understand.
And so I want to give back. It's really what we leave behind. In our legacy that we leave behind here. What are we going to leave our children? What are we going to leave our grandchildren? And so I want to try to make the world and the 4th District of Tennessee a better place for our kids and for our grandkids. And that's really why we're in this race. We can disagree on a lot of things politically. We can agree on a lot of things politically. But the one thing I can promise you is that I'm going to be honest with everybody. And this is not a top-down campaign. You're not going to see glossy commercial Steven Reynolds, you're not going to see that.
The attack campaign nonsense.
We have built this from the bottom up because we know that the only way to win is to go around and meet people, shake their hands, look them in the eye, and say, I'm a guy you can trust. I'm a guy you can send up there, and I'll be the same guy when I come back 4 years from now. So, but thank you guys for having me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate that, Steve. It was a pleasure.
Sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
so
David.
much.
We really love having you on.
Thank you, and I'll be glad to come back.
Yeah,
we can talk and go
revisit
all day with you guys.
You know,
Absolutely.
I think that
you better be able to.
Depending on the primary goes, yeah, that's going to be the way it goes. You know,
right?
If you're the primary candidate, well, you're going to have to answer some more questions.
Oh, sure.
We're going to get a little more serious, but
I'm great.
We're glad to have you on.
Thank you
glad
so
to hear
much.
what you have to say, and I'm glad to give you a platform.
Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, very good. And I guess that's going to be about it for us. I'm David Papiden.
I'm James McVeigh.
And we are Fermenting Opinions.
Thank you for being with us.